Chapter 210. Cho Xingfeng saw from afar that his disciple was the one who bullied others and even made false accusations. He felt helpless. He flew down, shielded Long Hanyang behind him, and apologized to Gong Yimo. "Mister, I'm really sorry. My disciple is immature and has disturbed you." Cho Xingfeng bowed politely, but Long Hanyang was not convinced. Why should he apologize? He molested a good girl in public and even framed her as a thief. He's obviously a shameless person. Cho Xingfeng heard and looked at her in confusion. Is that so? Was there a truth that he did not know? Gong Yimo was already stunned the moment Cho Xingfeng appeared. She actually saw him again, and in such a short time. Seeing that Gong Yimo did not refute, Long Hanyang said maliciously, "Of course. I whipped him just now because he molested me. He touched my hand." Cho Xingfeng heard. He was too naive to understand the truth, but he still looked at Gong Yimo and asked again. "You really bullied my disciple?" Gong Yimo looked at him with a complicated gaze and pointed at Long Hanyang. "She's your disciple?" Cho Xingfeng raised his head proudly. "Yes, she's the little disciple that I raise. She's the most important person to me." She felt as if she was hit by a stick. She was prepared, but when she saw this scene, she still felt uncomfortable. Long Hanyang was actually Cho Xingfeng's disciple, his most important person. And she was just a stranger. But Gong Yimo was a person with a strong state of mind. The pain only lasted for a moment. She adjusted herself and said in a low voice, "Your disciple is lying. I didn't molest her. The girl who ran away was really a thief. You liar. You're not only shameless, but also full of lies. I must beat you to death." Long Hanyang saw that someone was backing her up. She picked up the whip and wanted to hit again, however, he was stopped by Cho Xingfeng. He was in a bit of a dilemma. He looked at Gong Yimo and then looked at Long Hanyang. Why was what this person said different from what his disciple said? Long Hanyang was stopped and glared at Gong Yimo with resentment. She didn't know why, but she hated this person. She couldn't wait to see him disappear. She pinched herself hard and squeezed out a few drops of tears. She said pitifully, "Master, don't you believe me? Am I, your disciple, such an indiscriminate person?" While Cho Xingfeng was still trying to figure out what was going on, the crying on the other side became louder and louder. "A few days ago, someone tried to kill me, but you didn't take revenge for me. Now, someone is bullying me, but you don't believe me. What kind of master is he? I don't want you to be my master anymore." Her crying made Cho Xingfeng panic. When he was young, Long Hanyang had always played with him. Why didn't she want him? Just because of this person? Thinking of this, he also had some resentment towards Gong Yimo. He hurriedly said, "Yang don't cry. I'll take revenge for you right now." As he spoke, he attacked Gong Yimo. He used his lightness skill and clawed at Gong Yimo. Gong Yimo flew back. Seeing Cho Xingfeng getting closer and closer, she seemed to recall the time when they fought on the top of the mountain. At that time, she was tired of everything. She was tired of the same life every day. She said she wanted to go down the mountain. And Cho Xingfeng looked at her with a pair of eyes cleaner than snow, pleading softly, "Can you not go? You're the closest person to me. What will I do if you leave?" But at that time, Gong Yimo didn't listen. She wanted to go out and explore the world. "How about I go with you?" He seemed to have made up his mind and said this. But how did she answer at that time? She looked at his snow-white hand waving in front of her eyes. It was different from before when they were just fighting. This time, he used a lot of strength. At that time, she seriously thought about it and said, "The outside world doesn't suit you. Someone as clean as you can only stay here and wait for me to come back. But you didn't wait for me and found a little disciple in the blink of an eye. Does that mean the person who was with you at that time was the most important person in your life? Is that the person you can give your life for, and it doesn't have to be me? You're really as pure as snow, and as heartless as snow." Gong Yimo slapped his hand away. Cho Xingfeng was caught off guard and was hit by her. He almost forgot that at this time in this life, he was only at the 5th level. Cho Xingfeng was stunned. For the first time, he doubted his own martial arts. Only his master could defeat him. Why did that man last time do it? And this time, this stranger could do it too. Long Hanyang suddenly got angry. She supported Cho Feng and questioned him. Aren't you good at martial arts? Why can't you beat 1 or 2 people? Then why did you come to me? Go back to Mount Yun Ding to practice. Gong Yimo only made 1 move, so Long Hanyang didn't notice anything wrong. Cho Feng lowered his head sadly. Gong Yimo couldn't bear it. But she closed her eyes, thinking that it was good for him to go back. He wouldn't be used by Long Hanyang. So she smiled coldly. I also think you're not good enough. Why don't you go back and practice? Cho Feng was shocked. On one side was a master, and on the other side was a disciple who despised him. He pursed his lips and said, but I haven't got the fire cloud grass. Even if he wanted to go back, he must get the fire cloud grass. Gong Yimo now knew why they were here. Cho Feng's master was born with blocked blood, so he forced himself to practice martial arts. He often had to take medicine to maintain blood flow. The fire cloud grass was one of the most important medicines. It happened to only be found in the north. So every time, Mount Yun Ding had to pay a high price to buy it. And it was priceless. No wonder they were here. It was also rare that Cho Feng still remembered this when he was looking for someone. She didn't know that Cho Feng came down the mountain to find his disciple under the guise of looking for the fire cloud grass. So when he was in the border town, he didn't look for long before giving up. Fortunately, he met Long Hanyang here, which reminded him of this matter. Otherwise, he would have to go back empty-handed. Gong Yimo saw that he didn't want to go back, so she didn't want to care anymore. She was ready to continue her journey. What the eye doesn't see, the heart doesn't grieve over. But when she heard that he was going to the hopeless forest in the border town to look for the fire cloud grass, she remembered that there was another medicine that grew with the fire cloud grass that she could use. So she wanted to go with him. Anyway, she was already here. But she glanced at Long Hanyang. She was looking at her with an extremely venomous gaze, as if she was the enemy who killed her father. So she gave up the idea. She looked deeply at Cho Feng and turned to leave. She didn't expect Long Hanyang to stop her. Wait, bastard, don't you dare leave your name. Today's grudge, I will definitely avenge it in the future. Gong Yimo couldn't help laughing. Was there any enmity between them? So he ignored her and left, leaving behind Long Hanyang, who was filled with resentment. She silently remembered Gong Yimo's face in her heart, as if she had some kind of obsession. Chapter 211. In the hopeless forest, Gong Yimo yawned as she listened to the experienced herb gatherer talk about medicinal knowledge. She felt a little sleepy. Young master, if I bring you to the water cloud grass, will you really give me 100 taels? The herb gatherer was still worried, so he confirmed again. Gong Yimo took out a banknote from her sleeve and waved it in front of him. See this? 100 taels, it's genuine. Hurry up. Hey. Come with me, I'll definitely bring you to it. Definitely. I know where it is. As he grinned, he let his imagination run wild. Hey, you're really my benefactor. When I have this money, I'll have my daughter's dowry. She always said that I didn't buy her nice clothes and hair ornaments. Hey, this time I'll buy a big basket of them. I'll change her clothes every day. Gong Yimo listened and couldn't deny it. Although Dai Yu State was considered liberal, the status of women was still very low. This old man sounded like a henpecked husband, which was rare. They chatted along the way and walked for a whole day. In the evening, they finally arrived at the location where the herb gatherer found the water cloud grass. At this time, the two of them were lying on a mound, quietly looking at the big tiger in front of them. Looking at it from such a close distance, it looked really majestic. The herb gatherer was so scared that his face turned pale. He knew there was a tiger here, but it was the first time he was so close. He quickly took out the medicine he prepared and applied it on himself. He didn't forget to apply some on Gong Yimo. I don't need it. I only want to ask you, are you sure there's it there? There is. I saw it there last time. Not only is there water cloud grass, there's also fire cloud grass. It's just that that's the tiger's territory, so I didn't dare to pick it. Gong Yimo nodded. Then wait here. I'll be back soon." As she spoke, she walked out. "Hey, wait," the old herb gatherer shouted, but she had already run out. "It's over. This person is dead for sure." When the big tiger saw someone running in, it carefully walked around her. When it saw that she didn't have any weapons, it angrily pounced on her. The herb gatherer was so scared that he quickly closed his eyes. "It's over. 100 taels is gone, and this person died at such a young age. It's too pitiful." But he heard a whimper and muffled sound. He opened his eyes and saw that the tiger had fallen to the ground, but its stomach was still undulating. It should have just fainted. Gong Yimo grinned at him. "Hurry up and come." Hey, I'm coming. As he ran over, he stared at the tiger. He had clearly run past it, but he seemed to have thought of something and turned back. He pulled some branches and the like to cover the tiger. Gong Yimo looked at him, somewhat amused. "What are you doing? Are you afraid that it'll be killed by hunters?" He wiped his sweat and smiled kindly. "This tiger's nature isn't bad. As long as you don't step into its territory, it won't hurt anyone. It's all thanks to it that the nearby herbs are growing so well. Because there aren't many people who dare to go near it, I can rely on it to secretly earn some money." Gong Yimo thought for a moment and slowly said, "You can let a rabbit go because it won't hurt you in the future. But if you let a tiger go, it can kill you in the future. Aren't you making life difficult for yourself by doing this?" The herb gatherer chuckled. "This old man picks herbs for a living. Previously, I relied on it to occasionally pick some good herbs and live a good life. In the future, with the 100 taels that young master gave me, I won't be picking herbs anymore. I can even do some business. So, not only is it harmless to me, I'm indebted to it. Then what if other herb gatherers meet it?" At this moment, the old man narrowed his eyes and said something thought-provoking. "Then it's another karma. I shouldn't interfere." When Gong Yimo heard this, she was stunned. She was pulled forward by the herb gatherer in a daze. Looking at his graying hair, she suddenly smiled. He obviously had a hard time, but he still relied on his intelligence and worked hard to survive. Perhaps everyone had great wisdom in their hearts. It was just that some people were good at summarizing things, while others weren't. But for those who weren't good at summarizing things, their lives might not be uninteresting. Soon, they saw a large patch of fire cloud grass. And among the fire cloud grass, there were several strands of water cloud grass, red and green, full of vitality. This strange scene made Gong Yimo's reverence for nature deepen. Deep in her heart, she felt a trace of gentleness. That was a gift from Mother Earth. Just a little bit was enough to fill one's heart with joy. The herb gatherer smiled and said fawningly, "Young master, these herbs all belong to you. But for these fire cloud grass, can I take 2 strands?" His wife had a cold body and suffered from back pain all year round. Eating this could cure her illness. This was a rare good thing. It couldn't be bought outside even if you had money. Gong Yimo didn't care. She gestured for him to do as he pleased, and then gave him 100 taels of silver. He was full of joy. He held the money tightly in one hand, and carefully held the 2 strands of fire cloud grass in the other. He thought to himself, today was a big harvest. Then, he gratefully said goodbye to Gong Yimo and hurried down the mountain. He wanted to tell this good news to his wife and daughter. Gong Yimo smiled and shook her head. She lowered her head and continued to pick the herbs. She didn't know much about medicine, but she knew that this thing could cure Gong Che's heart disease. She had looked for it before, but didn't see it. This time, she heard Qiu Xingfeng say that there was fire cloud grass here, so she wanted to try her luck. Looking at the green plant in her hand, Gong Yimo sighed softly. She couldn't respond to Gong Che. So, this was her compensation for Gong Che? It didn't seem good. She was in a dilemma. At this moment, a scream was heard. Gong Yimo knew that it was the herb gatherer. Thinking, she quickly ran over to take a look. Her eyes turned red when she saw it. Long Hanyang ended the old man's life and snatched the fire cloud grass from his hand. The poor old man died with his eyes wide open. When he died, he still held the 100 taels of silver in his hand, as if he was afraid that it would run away. Unfortunately, he couldn't use it anymore. Old thing, You don't know what's good for you. I gave you money and you didn't sell it. You just want more money, right? Long Hanyang pulled out the dagger and wiped the blood on his clothes. She looked at him with disdain. But she really misunderstood. The old man didn't want to sell it not for money, but because his wife also needed it. Unfortunately, Long Hanyang suppressed the anger in her heart and refused to listen to him. Qiu Xingfeng saw that she killed people just like that, and for the first time, a trace of anger appeared in his heart. What are you doing? Why did you kill him? At this moment, Gong Yimo's angry voice was heard. I also want to ask, why did you kill him? Chapter 212. Seeing Gong Yimo, the anger in Long Hanyang's heart exploded. It's you again. What are you doing here? Gong Yimo didn't want to talk to her. She didn't even look at her. She killed the weak to vent her anger. She was so weak. Was she really taught by Yunding Mountain? She walked straight to the old man and found that he was dead. Her eyes darkened and she looked at the money he was holding tightly. This was the money he used to do business. It was for his daughter's dowry. He should return it to them. So, she took out the money. Perhaps it was because he was watching from the heavens. The money that he was holding tightly was taken out by her. Seeing this, Long Hanyang laughed out loud. You don't look like you're short of money. You even took money from the dead. Shameless. Yang. Qiu Xingfeng felt uneasy. He was angry because Long Hanyang killed someone. He called her, hoping that she would wake up. Isn't it? Long Hanyang snorted. She was trying to figure out Gong Yimo's intention. This person knew that we were coming to Hopeless Forest, but she came here before us. I don't know what she's up to. She was talking excitedly, but Gong Yimo didn't care about her at all. She just lowered her head and closed the old man's eyes. Then, she got up and walked towards Long Hanyang. The herb gatherers were familiar with this forest. The only threat was the tiger, but it was knocked out by Gong Yimo. He should have been safe and smooth on his way back. So, Gong Yimo didn't ask him to stay. He was so pitiful. He couldn't wait to go back and report the good news. He didn't expect that he would lose his life just because he was a little late in collecting the fire cloud grass. He died with his eyes wide open. Gong Yimo couldn't help but think, could this be karma? Seeing that she was getting closer and closer, Long Hanyang finally felt afraid. The murderous aura around her was like a huge rock, gradually pressing her down until she couldn't breathe. Long Hanyang quickly hid behind Qiu Xingfeng. But no matter how fast she was, how could she be Gong Yimo's opponent? So, Gong Yimo directly grabbed her neck and lifted her up. At that moment, her calm eyes overlapped with Gong Dai's murderous eyes. The scene seemed to return to that night. Long Hanyang's heart thumped. She knew that she really wanted to kill her. Help! She couldn't say anything. Qiu Xingfeng hurriedly said, Young master, please be merciful. My disciple is wrong for killing people. She's wrong. I will compensate her family. Shut up. This was the first time in 2 lifetimes that Gong Yimo spoke to Qiu Xingfeng in such a tone. She strangled Long Hanyang with one hand and her cold eyes swept over Qiu Xingfeng, who was shocked by her words. Her expression was full of disappointment. Is this how your master educated you? What's your original intention? Bully the weak and let this woman bully others with her power? Is that why you practice martial arts? You disappoint me so much. Qiu Xingfeng's face turned pale, and he kept retreating. At that moment, he seemed to see his master scolding him. What was his original intention? He didn't know. His master said he was a martial arts genius, so he practiced martial arts. But no one ever told him why he practiced martial arts. Moreover, Gong Yimo said that she was disappointed in him. Even though he knew that the other party was just a stranger, he was still shaken by her words. It was as if there was someone very important to him, and she was disappointed in him. After that, Gong Yimo didn't look at him anymore. If he didn't lack intelligence and followed whoever he followed, then he wasn't worth her trouble. But this woman, she narrowed her eyes and had the intention to kill. She tightened her grip. The veins on Long Hanyang's forehead bulged, and her face turned red. Obviously, she could only breathe out and not breathe in. At this moment, Qiu Xingfeng attacked. He struck with his palm, and Gong Yimo stepped back. With a swoosh, he pulled out the sword beside him and turned to cut at her arm. Gong Yimo subconsciously let go and stepped back. Long Hanyang fell to the ground and curled into a ball. She coughed violently. Escaping from death didn't make her grateful. Instead, she looked at Gong Yimo with resentment. Gong Yimo looked at Cho Xingfeng indifferently and smiled coldly. She killed someone. I want her to pay with her life. Are you going to protect her? Cho Xingfeng gripped his sword tightly and said in a low voice, she killed someone. As her teacher, I have to teach her a lesson. Besides, you want to kill her to pay for the old man's life. If she dies, do I have to kill you to pay for her? You can try. A hidden sword slipped out of Gong Yimo's sleeve. She raised her eyebrows and smiled. If I die in your hands, I can only blame myself for not being skilled enough. Kill her. Master. Long Hanyang hugged her neck on the ground and said uncomfortably, kill her. Cho Xingfeng was in a difficult position. Rationally, what he did was wrong. But now, if he didn't attack, the other party would kill his little disciple. He didn't want to. Even if he was angry with Long Hanyang, he wouldn't watch her die. So, he could only attack. Seeing him move, Gong Yimo also moved. She was now in a higher state than Cho Xingfeng and had more experience than him. So, she wasn't afraid of him at all. In the last life, he practiced with her. In this life, it was time for her to teach him. When the two of them clashed, it was different from the last time she fought with Gong Yun. This time, she was much fiercer. So, Cho Xingfeng, who was doubting his own decision, kept retreating. In the end, his sword was knocked away by her. He looked at his hand in a daze. He lost. And he lost so thoroughly. Long Hanyang couldn't believe it. Why was it the wind and nature technique again? Wasn't this the unique technique of Mount Yunding? Why did Gong Dai know it, and so did this stranger? She couldn't believe it and asked in a hoarse voice. Who are you? Her heart was beating fast. Because she remembered that Gong Dai's martial arts were taught by his royal sister. And some people even said that Gong Dai seemed to have ulterior motives towards his royal sister. She didn't believe it at first, but after hearing that woman's name from Gong Dai, she believed it. Hearing the voice, Gong Yimo looked at her, tilted her head slightly and told her directly. I'm Gong Yimo. Long Hanyang's eyes widened. But she saw the other party showing a mouthful of white teeth and looking at her deeply. That's right, I'm the one who wants your life. Saying this, her sword stabbed towards Long Hanyang, and at the critical moment, Cho Xingfeng blocked in front of her. After escaping death, she was finally afraid. She clung to Cho Xingfeng's back tightly and looked at Gong Yimo with fear and hatred. It was really her. It was really her. Her disguise technique was really good. No wonder Aunt's people couldn't find her. Cho Xingfeng gritted his teeth and looked at Gong Yimo with determination. If you want to kill her, then kill me first. Gong Yimo curled up the corner of her mouth and smiled lightly. You think I don't dare? Chapter 213. How dare she? Cho Xingfeng felt the murderous aura from her, but he still bit his lower lip and refused to move. Long Hanyang, who was hiding behind him, seized the opportunity and said, You can't kill me. I'm Princess Jiaoqing. If you kill me, Imperial Grandmother won't let you go. Imperial Concubine Long won't let you go either. Gong Yimo touched her hair and suddenly looked at her. I used to be the Chaoyang princess. Besides, you're all dead. Who would know? Long Hanyang was scared and didn't dare to speak anymore. She only hoped that Cho Xingfeng could block Gong Yimo for her. Cho Xingfeng said in a low voice, She knows she's wrong this time. Please let her go. I promise I'll look after her. I won't let her kill anymore. Seeing Gong Yimo looking at them with a smile that wasn't a smile, Cho Xingfeng's forehead began to drip with sweat. He saw that Gong Yimo didn't give up and said loudly, Or you can kill me. I'll pay for it with my life. When he said this, Gong Yimo looked at Long Hanyang and just listened without saying a word. Her reaction was really chilling. It was as if she wanted her to take the blame for Cho Xingfeng. Such a person was really scary. She couldn't stay. She raised her hidden blade and pointed at them, saying coldly, Move. No. Qiu Xingfeng shook his head resolutely. His clear eyes looked at Gong Yimo. But he was so serious and he was protecting such a person. Gong Yimo felt anger rising in her heart. It wasn't because he was protecting Long Hanyang, but because he couldn't tell right from wrong. She couldn't help but ask sarcastically, "Did your master Immortal Wangji teach you this? Taught you not to tell right from wrong, to be partial to your fellow disciples, and to ignore everything?" She couldn't understand why Immortal Wangji would accept such a woman. Didn't he only accept geniuses? Where was Long Hanyang? Qiu Xingfeng couldn't refute. He gritted his teeth, "But she grew up with me. I can't let her die in front of me, then there's no other way." Gong Yimo sneered, "Because I must kill her." As he spoke, he brandished his sword to stab Long Hanyang. She screamed and retreated while Qiu Xingfeng fought with her barehanded. It was obvious that he was much fiercer than before. After all, he was still a martial arts genius. Once he got serious, Gong Yimo also had to deal with him seriously. The forest was torn apart by the sword chi and fist force, revealing a large open space. The color of the sky was also becoming more and more brilliant. Countless colors intertwined and overlap. Only the last trace of the sun was left, and the sky was about to turn dark. Long Hanyang's legs went soft from the invisible killing aura in the air. She leaned against the tree and did not even have the strength to escape. She didn't want to die. She hadn't gone back to tell her aunt that this bitch was here. She hadn't married Gong Dai yet. She couldn't die. But after all, Qiu Xingfeng was one realm lower than Gong Yimo. No matter how talented he was, without Gong Dai's ruthlessness, how could he stop Gong Yimo? Therefore, at the moment when the sky suddenly turned dark, his sword found the right opportunity to stab Long Hanyang, who was behind him. If this stab hit, she would die for sure. Long Hanyang felt that death was approaching again. She let out a shrill scream. She half squatted and held her head. But she didn't feel any pain. She opened her eyes and looked up, only to see Qiu Xingfeng grabbing the hidden sword with both hands. The blood dyed his white clothes red. It was a shocking sight. "Master, save me." Long Hanyang was scared silly. She stared at him and begged. She didn't want Gong Yimo to die, she only wanted to escape. Qiu Xingfeng's action made Gong Yimo's face turn ugly. The sword was grabbed by Qiu Xingfeng with both hands. Looking at the drop of blood, Long Hanyang didn't feel heartache. But she had been with Qiu Xingfeng for 13 years. She was decisive and disappointed in him, but her heart wasn't made of stone. "I'm sorry. I can't let you kill her." He looked up at Gong Yimo. The innocence in his eyes reminded Gong Yimo of the time when he was blown up to save her. Her heart trembled. She almost let go of the sword in her hand. After Qiu Xingfeng said this, his thin lips were tightly pursed. Obviously, he wouldn't let go. His serious face seemed to overlap with the face in her previous life. At that time, when she died in his arms, she screamed and asked him why. He said, "I can't watch you die. I'd rather die." What a similar scene. But one was to protect her, the other was to protect the person she wanted to kill. Gong Yi's hand holding the sword trembled slightly. She felt sad and angry, but also sad. Was this karma? No. She wavered for a moment, then looked at Long Hanyang. This person was young, but she was inexplicably hostile to her. She didn't feel remorse like Li Ku. And at this time, her eyes were full of resentment. She couldn't stay. Staying would only cause trouble. "So, Qiu Xingfeng, I'm sorry." Gong Yimo's eyes sharpened. She exerted strength in her hands. That narrow hidden sword couldn't be held tightly. So, Qiu Xingfeng held it tightly with both hands. The sword was still slowly moving forward. Gong Yimo could clearly feel the flesh on his palm being cut open. She gritted her teeth. She couldn't bear it. She took a deep breath and stopped. At this time, the tip of the sword was less than an inch away from Long Hanyang's nose. Long Hanyang was so scared that her face turned pale. She was too well protected. In the palace, she was protected by the Empress Dowager. On the mountain, there were no disputes, so she was lawless. But now, death was so close to her. She was scared. Her heart was trembling. She wanted to run, but the other side's terrifying aura made her body stiff. She could only watch as the sword fiercely cut through Qiu Xingfeng's palm and approached her. Sticky blood flowed down the sword because of Gong Yimo's strength. Long Hanyang, who was at the end of the sword, could clearly see the rolling blood drops falling on her clothes one by one. "Can you smell it?" Gong Yimo made up her mind and pushed the sword forward a little more. This time, she could clearly feel the friction between the sword and the bone. Qiu Xingfeng finally couldn't help but groan. He bit his lower lip tightly. His hand was still tightly holding the sword, unwilling to let go. Didn't it hurt? Why was he so stubborn? But it was useless for him to hold on because the tip of the sword had already touched Long Hanyan's nose. At that moment, the cold murderous air seemed to pierce into her body through the tip of the sword. Her body was tightly pressed against the tree trunk. Her legs were in a half-squatting position. Her legs were trembling. At this moment, even her breathing stopped. "Can you smell it?" Gong Yimo asked again. "This is the smell of your master's blood. Don't you feel any heartache?" Chapter 215. When the little girl heard this, her eyes reddened. She quickly grabbed onto Gong Yimo's clothes and said anxiously, "Big brother, say something. My father isn't dead. How many times has he walked through that lousy forest? How could he be dead?" That's right, he had walked through it so many times without dying, but he had died the first time he walked with her. Was she destined to bleed everywhere she went? Gong Yimo was bewitched. Seeing that Gong Yimo didn't speak, the little girl couldn't help but burst into tears. At that moment, the house was very gloomy and oppressive, making it hard for Gong Yimo to breathe. At this moment, a fragrant smell wafted out from the kitchen. Gong Yimo was a little stunned. The adult and child were still crying, but she walked into the kitchen in a daze. She saw that the kitchen was very tidy, and bowls of vegetables were placed on the clay stove. They were all covered with bowls, and the chicken had just been put into the pot. It was obvious that they wanted to make soup, but they were interrupted by her arrival. The crying outside was still going on, but the moment she took the spatula, her panicked heart calmed down. The dead couldn't be brought back to life. She couldn't beg for their forgiveness, but at least she could make them dinner. This house was very small, but it was very cozy. Many small details showed that they lived their lives seriously, and they were a happy family of 3. But at this moment, the whole house was filled with sorrow. Money might be able to buy a lot of things, but life was so fragile. It could be gone just like that. She had seen too many deaths, and even she was prepared to die at any time. The only thing she could do was to not have any regrets. At this moment, she clearly heard the woman's cries. "Old man, how could you die? I was so fierce to you all the time. I didn't mean to scold you all the time. You can't blame me." There was also the sound of the little girl sobbing. "Father, I won't say that you didn't let me live a good life anymore. I don't want beautiful clothes anymore. Come back, father." She tightened her grip on the spatula. She didn't know why, but she also felt like crying. How pitiful would it be for a person to be unable to enjoy life in this world, to be constantly floating in the midst of suffering, to die without even seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. Therefore, she couldn't have any regrets or unfinished words. Gong Yimo looked at the steaming soup pot and suddenly wondered if she would have any regrets if she died one day. After crying for a long time, they were tired. When they came back to their senses, they saw that Gong Yimo had already placed the dishes on the table one by one. They felt very upset. If it weren't for her, their husband and father wouldn't have died. However, Old Man Jiao had told them that picking herbs was very dangerous and that there were tigers in the mountains. If he were to pass away one day, he only hoped that they could still live well. Therefore, they were usually very stingy and tried their best to save money. Unexpectedly, they were right. When the woman thought of this, she started crying again. Now, she had 100 taels. It was enough for them to eat for the rest of their lives, but the old man had never enjoyed a single day of happiness. He died just like that. How could she bear it? Gong Yimo finally placed the soup in the middle of the table, washed the bowls and chopsticks, and placed them one by one. Then, she said, "Are you hungry? Come and eat." Seeing that they didn't move, Gong Yimo looked at the table full of dishes and said faintly, With such a sumptuous meal, isn't it a celebration feast? Now that he has achieved his goal, shouldn't you all celebrate for him? Gong Yimo was referring to the old man earning 100 taels, while the woman noticed that Gong Yimo had taken an extra set of bowls and chopsticks. In a moment of sorrow, she tried her best to wipe away her tears and walked over. If the old man was here, he would definitely think so. She pulled her daughter, who was still crying, to sit at the table. Looking at the scene in front of her, she couldn't help but cry again. Usually, they wouldn't be able to eat such good food. Before the old man left, he had vowed that he would definitely get the 100 taels today. She then steeled herself to cook rice, thinking that even if it wasn't 100 taels, it would be fine. Usually, they would eat porridge. But now, they couldn't even eat a celebration feast during the new year. With the merit, they wouldn't have to worry about food and clothing in the future, but he was gone. Seeing that the two of them didn't move, Gong Yimo picked up her chopsticks and put some food into an empty bowl. Treat it as a farewell feast. Don't you want to have your last meal with him? Eat. Eat, eat, let's eat. The woman wiped away her tears again and wiped her daughter's tears as well. Then, she really started to eat. The woman started to eat, but her daughter glared angrily at Gong Yimo and said in a hoarse voice, "It's all your fault. If it wasn't for you, my father wouldn't have died. Give me back my father." She threw her chopsticks at Gong Yimo, but the woman held her down. "Have you forgotten what your father said to you?" The woman was very fierce. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying, but deep down, they were filled with sorrow. The little girl knew that her mother was referring to her father's words. He said that he might die on the mountain one day, and if that day really came, he told them not to be too sad. At that moment, her heart was filled with anger and pain. She got up and ran to the room. The woman wanted to stop her, but she didn't have the strength to speak. She could only lower her head and eat without tasting the food. These were all the old man's favorite food, but in the morning, she only gave him a bowl of porridge. This soup was bland, and she didn't know if he would be hungry on his way to the netherworld. Gong Yimo lowered her head and ate. She didn't know how rare this meal was, and how much of a pity it was that the old man didn't get to eat it. She only thought about it, and then took out a banknote from her sleeve. "I know that money can't buy a life. I buried him in the mountain according to your customs and didn't erect a tombstone. As for this money, I only hope that you can live a better life in the future because he kept talking about you all along the way. It's obvious that he cares about you." Hearing this, the woman's tears fell. She pushed the money back and said angrily, "Thank you, young master. Thank you, young master, for burying him. I just want to know why such a good person like my old man died." Gong Yimo didn't hide anything. They had the right to know the truth. After hearing this, the woman couldn't hold it in any longer. She slumped over the table and wailed loudly, "It's all my fault. It's all my fault. If I didn't keep saying that my back hurt and my womb was cold, the old man wouldn't have been killed over a stalk of grass. It's all my fault." Gong Yimo said softly, "It's not your fault. I will avenge you all." When the woman heard this, she quickly looked up at her. Gong Yimo said, "I only chopped off 2 of her fingers this time, but the next time, I will take her life, so don't cry." When the woman heard this, she nodded and shook her head. After a long while, she finally stopped crying. "We can't accept this money." "Why?" The woman wiped her tears and said, "The old man said that people like us get rich overnight and people change easily, so 100 taels is the limit. And you promised to avenge us, so we can't accept this money." Gong Yimo couldn't help but sigh, "You're a sensible old man." As she said this, she personally poured a bowl of soup for her. The woman drank a mouthful with tears in her eyes and choked. "This soup, why is it sweet?" Gong Yimo also drank a mouthful and said with narrowed eyes, "Because life won't always be bitter. You've worked so hard for so long, it's time for it to be sweet." Chapter 216. When she left, Gong Yimo did not forget to leave behind 2 firecloud herbs before leaving. She did not know why, but after doing this, she suddenly felt enlightened. She seemed to have understood something, and the path in front of her became clearer. When Gong Yimo returned, Kim Yoon could clearly feel the changes in her. It was as if a luminous pearl had been polished into a purple pearl. Being with her made people happier. After passing Gong Che's wen hand to Kim Yoon, Gong Yimo felt her body and mind lighten. Kim Yoon did not ask what she was doing, because he had been forced to a miserable state recently. His mother had been forcing him to choose a concubine, but he was unwilling. So, his mother wanted to find Yimo. His mother probably knew what he was thinking, but he also knew that Yimo's heart was not on this. Moreover, she did not belong to Yuheng. Time passed by slowly. From the blazing sun to the falling snow, more than a year had passed. Gong Yimo had just turned 17. Many things had happened in this year. For example, Yuheng's Golden Jade Bank had been established. It overthrew the many forms of banknotes in the past and introduced a new type of banknote that could be used throughout the country. It had annexed all the previous banks and turned them into the country's private property. Moreover, it was also Kim Yoon's private property. This kind of smooth and dominant scene was really a scene that other countries didn't even dare to imagine. The country was thriving day by day, but Yuheng's emperor's health was deteriorating day by day. No one knew what was going on, but he had been taking medicine to recover. However, his love for Yoon Jin did not change. Now, only Yoon Jin could enter the Golden Hall Palace to take care of the sick. It was obvious that he doted on her. In his current state, he naturally could not care about anything. Now, Yuheng's big and small affairs were all handled by Kim Yoon. Whether or not he was the crown prince did not matter much. Yuheng's side was smooth sailing, but Dayu State side was much more tragic. In just over a year, 4 princes of Dayu State had died. 3 of them had been personally killed by Gong Dai, and Dayu State had also opened a state-owned bank just like Yuheng. However, Dayu State was vast and had abundant resources, so the original owners of the banks were much more unyielding than Yuheng. Furthermore, there were so many powers in Dayu State, and there were so many princes. If they brought the money with them to any of the princes, it would cause a massacre. Therefore, Gong Dai spent an entire year to take down these people. After killing a lot of people, he finally came out on top. He established Flourishing Age Bank. For a moment, Gong Dai was in the limelight. He even overshadowed Gong Cheng, who was worried about his son's death. He became the #1 person in Dayu State. However, due to the impending return of Gong Che, this momentum was somewhat subtle. Gong Dai used the bank to generate money, but he was still in the beginning stages. Therefore, he mainly relied on his previous business. However, Gong Che had built the canal. In the past few years, money had flowed in like water. He was also a reputable crown prince. The Liu family's rise was also very fast. Many people were wondering if the situation in Dayu State would change after Gong Che's return. Gong Yimo's fleet was doing very well. The profits from smuggling were huge. However, she believed that it would not be long before she could openly smuggle ship. Therefore, she was in a good mood every day. She was doing business on the water. The mines that she had previously explored were also on the right track. She also had a share in Kim Yoon's bank. Based on this, she was definitely the richest woman in the world. Gong Yimo was in a good mood. However, very soon, someone came to find trouble with her. Just as she was warming herself by the fire, eating snacks, and reading a book, someone from the palace came. She was originally curious because Kim Yoon had gone out. In the end, it turned out that they were looking for her. She calculated the time and realized that she had not been to the Yuheng Palace for 2 years. In the past, when the palace summoned her, Kim Yoon would reject them. Now that Kim Yoon was not around, she was a little stunned. It seemed like it would not be good if she did not go. Therefore, she reluctantly put down the snacks, tidied her clothes, and walked out. There were plum blossoms blooming in the courtyard. Large patches of blooming flowers were enchanting. Everyone could not help but stop to take a second look. It was said that these plum blossoms were transplanted by the second prince at a high price. Many of them had died. The ones that survived had all become part of Gong Yimo's courtyard. It was a beautiful sight to behold. However, when Gong Yimo walked out of the room, the eunuch who was in charge of announcing the imperial edict took a look. His gaze was no longer attracted by the plum blossoms. The emperor of Yuheng was lustful. There were countless beauties in his harem. Even the famous Madame Yoon Jin, who was now imperial consort Yun, did not make him so amazed. Time had brightened Gong Yimou's appearance. She was changing every day. Every change was towards a more beautiful direction. Even someone as beautiful as Kim Yoon would sometimes fall into a daze when looking at her. When she raised her eyes to look at you, you would feel that it was an honor to be reflected in her clean and pure eyes. It was said that one's appearance was born from one's heart. Gong Yimou was not only beautiful, but more attractive was actually a kind of temperament that could tolerate and transcend all things. This kind of special temperament was rare even for men. When it fell on a woman, even a eunuch like him could not take his eyes off her. He could not help but reveal a bright smile. "You must be Miss Shi. I have heard so much about you. I am under Imperial Consort Yun's order to invite you to the palace." A gust of wind blew. Gong Yimou shrunk her neck and shrunk her entire body into the pure white fur coat. She looked like a big milk cat. However, her actions did not make people feel that it was indecent. They only felt that a beauty should be so free and easy. Can I not go?" Her words stunned the eunuch who was delivering the imperial edict. Following that, Gong Yimou burst into laughter. In that moment, it was as if the winter sun had risen. "I'm just teasing you. Let's go." Only then did the eunuch return to his senses. He nodded repeatedly and followed. She dressed up neatly and did not need to change clothes. However, after the eunuch saw it, he was a little hesitant. There was no other reason than that this white fur coat was not very good. This white fur coat was worth 1,000 gold pieces. It was said that the second prince had spent a lot of money to obtain it. There were only 2 coats, one purple and one white. At that time, the imperial consort liked both very much. However, the always filial prince did not give her both. Instead, he let her choose one. The other one actually fell into this girl's hands, therefore, he opened his mouth to remind her. However, he thought that this girl must be the second prince's beloved. Who was the second prince? He would definitely be the emperor in the future. This girl was so favored. If the imperial consort saw her, she would not make things difficult for her. Walking into Yuheng's palace, Gong Yimou was not in a good mood. Yun Jin had changed. Although she did not enter the palace, she had many secret agents under her. Why did the emperor of Yuheng fall ill at such a young age? There were so many powerful and influential women in the harem. Why did they all end up in such a bad state? These things could not withstand deep thought. It was said that the Empress Dowager of Yuqi was struggling recently. She could only hope that Yun Jin would not be the next Empress Dowager of Yuqi. If that happened, Kim Yoon would be too pitiful. Chapter 217. Yun Jin had arranged to meet her in Huating, which was a pavilion in the middle of a lake. In this kind of weather, Gong Yimou was speechless. She sat there and hugged her small heater tightly, refusing to let go. There had been a few heavy snowfalls, so the view of the lake from the pavilion was still very beautiful. The roof tiles in the distance, the rockery nearby, and the frozen lake water looked like a sketch. With just a few strokes, it gave people a very natural sense of beauty. Seeing that Yun Jin had not come for a long time, Gong Yimou leaned on the chair in the pavilion and looked down at the ice flowers on the lake. "Is it beautiful?" Surprisingly, Yun Jin was the only one who had come. Gong Yimou turned back. At that moment, she saw surprise in Yun Jin's eyes. However, she did not know if it was an illusion, but what she saw was more jealousy. She was still very beautiful, but now she was wearing a luxurious dress and had heavy makeup. She was not as beautiful as she was when they first met. "Greetings, Your Highness." Gong Yimou smiled and bowed. Yun Jin almost had an illusion that they had not seen each other for a few years, but only for a few days. Yun Jin accepted it indifferently and grunted. She sat on the stone stool in the middle of the pavilion. There was not even a servant to serve tea. "In these few years, whenever I feel unhappy, I will come here for a walk. Do you think it's beautiful here?" Gong Yimou nodded. "The view is excellent." Yun Jin smiled and said, "Then if I push you into the lake, will you be afraid?" Gong Yimou looked up at her and a ray of light flashed across her eyes. "You can try." Her words made Yun Jin choke. The originally warm scene suddenly became tense, and there was even some unknown danger floating. Soon, Yoon Jin smiled again. After years of training, she was no longer the immature woman. Gong Yimo saw the shadow of Empress Dowager Yuchi in her. This consort was just joking. You are Yoon's sweetheart. Because of you, Yoon is even avoiding this consort. How could this consort possibly dare to do anything to you? In other words, without Kim Yoon, what would you do to me? Gong Yimo giggled. There is no enmity between us, right? Her words were always like this. Sometimes, they were as direct as a blade, making people unable to resist. The smile on Yoon Jin's face was a little stiff. There is no enmity, but... She covered her mouth and laughed. But... I'm jealous of you. What are you jealous of me for? Gong Yimo sat opposite her with her hands on the stone table. She supported her face with her hands and asked in confusion. She was beautiful, and her casual movements were pleasing to the eye for no reason. Yoon Jin stared intently at her as she smiled. I'm jealous of your youth and beauty. I'm jealous that you can travel everywhere. I'm jealous that Yoon likes you. When she finished speaking, a trace of resentment flashed through her eyes. It was so fast that no one could see it clearly. By the time she came back to her senses, she continued to speak slowly. In the past, Yoon was so obedient. No matter what this consort wanted, no matter how difficult it was, he would give it to this consort. He was wholehearted and only treated this consort well. But, ever since you appeared, Yoon changed. He no longer only cares about this consort. With you in his heart became biased. When Gong Yimo heard her say all this with a smile, she didn't know why, but she felt her hairs stand on end. Since you're so afraid of losing his attention, why do you keep forcing him to get married? Yoon Jin glared at her. Her smile was like a snake in beautiful skin, enchanting and dangerous. Of course, it's because I want those women to force you away. That way, Yoon will be this consort's again. What a lunatic. Gong Yimo fell silent. Of the 30,000 women in Dayu State's imperial harem, she had never heard of anyone being forced to go crazy. As expected, Yuheng's imperial palace was better at tempering people than Dayu State. She knew that the emperor of Dayu State was brilliant. No matter how many people there were in the imperial harem, they couldn't overturn the heavens. However, Yuheng was different. A few years ago, it was even worse. Yoon Jin wasn't a strong-willed person to begin with. Now that she had reached this point, she was afraid that her insides were already twisted. No wonder Kim Yoon had been sighing so often these past 2 years. She knew that this was the problem. Then why did you call me here? You want me to leave? No, Yoon Jin quickly rejected her and looked at her with her beautiful eyes. In the past, this consort really wanted someone to chase you away in this consort's place, but now, this consort hopes that you can marry Yoon. That way, you'll be like this consort, a bird in a cage. When the time comes, this consort will marry many women for Yoon so that you can have a taste of how I feel. The last word I was filled with resentment. However, when she said this, her expression was very normal. It was as if she was talking about the weather or something very normal. However, the meaning behind her words was terrifying. Gong Yimo knew that Yoon Jin was jealous of her freedom. She also resented her for stealing Kim Yoon's attention. After all, Kim Yoon did belong to her alone back then. The more brutal the imperial harem was, the more she missed the carefree time in the cold palace. Naturally, she hated herself even more. She was, just like those mothers in modern times who had a child love-struck plot. It was just that this plot was forced out of her. Gong Yimo decided to provoke her and make her give up on this idea. She smiled slightly. Didn't Kim Yoon tell you? Tell me what? Yoon Jin looked like she was listening attentively as she quietly looked at Gong Yimo. Kim Yoon, he. Gong Yimo flashed a dazzling smile. Kim Yoon said that he likes me a lot. He even said that as long as I agree, he will only marry me in this lifetime. So if you want to find someone to share my love with, it'll be a little difficult. Her words caused Yoon Jin's face to twist for a moment. Gong Yimo stuck out her tongue inwardly and continued to lie. Also, he said that his mother had suffered too much in her life, so he can't repeat her mistakes. Therefore, he decided to only marry one person in this lifetime. He even said that he would only marry me. That's why I didn't agree and wanted to play around. He had no choice but to indulge me, so he kept rejecting the marriage. You still don't know about this, right? How dare you? Yoon Jin suddenly slammed the table. You want to marry Yoon like this? What a fool's dream. But her heart was even more twisted, as if there was a fire burning inside. Why was Gong Yimo able to meet such a good person like her son, but she could only meet such a disgusting man like Jin Sheng? Whether it's a fool's dream or not, don't you have any idea? Gong Yimo appeared calm, as if Kim Yoon had said so with certainty. Yoon Jin looked at her gloomily and suddenly shouted, "Shut up! Guards!" she ordered. Very quickly, people ran over and stood behind her. Those people were obviously the hidden guards set up by the Emperor of Yuheng to protect her, and they had already been firmly subdued by Yoon Jin. This person has offended her superiors. Throw her into the lake to wake her up, Yoon Jin said coldly with a venomous expression. Yes. Someone quickly tried to grab Gong Yimo, but Gong Yimo didn't even look at him and said, "If you don't want Kim Yoon to hate you, you can try." Yoon Jin indeed hesitated, but her face was still cold and hard. What a joke. Yoon is this consort's biological son. He'll hate me. Gong Yimo rubbed her stomach and said with a smile, "If you don't believe me, you can try." Her fearless look, coupled with her previous actions, made Yoon Jin's expression turn sinister. Her voice changed instantly. Could it be that you're pregnant with Yoon's child? Chapter 218. Gong Yimo almost spat out her food when she heard that. She had eaten too many snacks at home and touched her stomach. How did she get pregnant? She had said those words to scare Yoon Jin. Besides, she was right. She had worked with Kim Yoon on many occasions now. If Yoon Jin really did something to her, Kim Yoon would definitely not sit idly by. However, she rolled her eyes and said vaguely with a smile, "Then do you still want to touch me? If you don't want to touch her, then let her go home." Gong Yimo was all smiles. Wrapped in the snow-white fur coat, she looked like a cute little fox. Yoon Jin was infuriated by these words. She was speechless for a long time. She knew that this girl of unknown origin had ulterior motives. She was really pregnant. Wow, what a good trick. Yoon Jin gritted her teeth in anger. Ever since she had appeared, Yoon had not treated her as well as before. Take the white fur coat on her as an example. She had liked it so much and wanted both. However, Yoon was such an obedient child and had insisted on taking one of them. It was even her favorite white. Hence, when she saw Gong Yimo's clothes today, her heart was burning with anger and her words were ambiguous. She was fearless. Firstly, Yoon Jin was venting her anger. Secondly, she knew that as long as she did not go overboard, Yoon would not do anything to her. However, it was different now. This woman was actually pregnant with Kim Yoon's child. Thinking about how Yoon had been treating her better these few years, if they really got married, would Yoon still remember her as his mother? No, her life was already hard enough. Yoon was her only son, and he was also someone who treated her well. He could not be snatched away. As she thought about it, her eyes turned cold and she said to the secret guard, "Throw her out." Yoon Jin knew that Gong Yimo was good at martial arts, but she looked down on women, so she didn't think that Gong Yimo was very powerful. Although there were many women living happily in the world, in front of Yoon Jin, only Gong Yimo could stimulate her the most. Because Gong Yimo had seen her at her worst, she also saw how sad she was now. Therefore, it seemed that as long as Gong Yimo disappeared, the past would never happen. Since that's the case, then disappear. Gong Yimo was stunned after hearing her words. Why did she still want to fight? She was pregnant with Kim Yoon's child. Seeing that those people were really coming over, Gong Yimo was very puzzled and asked, "I really don't remember any deep hatred between us. Why are you suddenly so hostile towards me?" Perhaps it wasn't sudden. Ever since Yoon Jin came out of the cold palace a few years ago, she could feel that Yoon Jin was hostile towards her, so she didn't want to see her in the past 2 years. Deep hatred? Yoon Jin smiled. In this grey sky, her heavy makeup was a stunning color. However, she touched her face. She said with a strange expression, Do you know what kind of life I've been living these past few years? Seeing that she had spoken and used the word I, the secret guard only surrounded Gong Yimo in the pavilion and didn't make a move. Gong Yimo was all ears. You don't know. Jin Sheng disgusts me so much. He has a weird habit. In the first year, I was living in hell. If I didn't grit my teeth and persevere, I would have been tortured to death in bed by him. Gong Yimo was a little stunned. She didn't expect to hear such words from Yoon Jin one day. Yoon Jin actually rolled up her sleeves in front of everyone. There were burn marks on her fair arms and some old wounds, but they were no longer obvious. Gong Yimo's expression turned cold. Yoon Jin continued to smile. When those women in the imperial harem saw that I was favored, they couldn't wait to swallow me up. Do you know why I didn't have another child in the past 3 years? Because in the first year, I was drugged by the Empress and sterilized. At that time, I was bleeding non-stop. It was only later that I found out that I actually miscarried a child who wasn't even a month old. Gong Yimo was stunned. Why didn't Kim Yoon tell her these things? It wasn't that Kim Yoon didn't want to tell her, but that Kim Yoon felt that Gong Yimo had helped them too much. Since his mother had chosen this path, could it be that he still needed Mo-er to help her settle the imperial harem? So he didn't say anything. He thought that Yoon Jin would understand one day, but he didn't expect that she would walk this path to the end. Yoon Jin slowly turned around and smiled enchantingly. Look. Am I beautiful? Beautiful, naturally beautiful. Otherwise, she wouldn't have given birth to Kim Yoon. Her expression gradually turned sinister. But why? You're a beauty, I'm also a beauty, but you're so happy. You can do whatever you want and go wherever you want. You're already so happy. Why do you still want to snatch Yoon from me? She glared at Gong Yimo with red eyes. 2 years ago, when I had a miscarriage, Yoon only stayed with me for 1 day. But what about you? You only ate something bad, so Yoon took 3 days off to take care of you at home. I'm his mother. She didn't even think about it. Was it suitable for Kim Yoon, a man, to stay with her all day long? This summer, I said I want to eat lychees within 3 days. However, Yoon refused. She said that it would be a waste of money and manpower. She wanted me to wait for a while longer. You said you wanted Liu Li, and Yoon immediately ordered people to look for it. She even bought it at a high price. I'm afraid it only took her less than 3 days, right? Gong Yimo was speechless. Even if she said that she needed Liu Li, she was afraid that it would be taken as an excuse. There were too many things like this, and each of them made Yoon Jin very sad. Perhaps this was the woman's conspiracy. She tricked her into giving herself to the emperor and suffering every day so that she could monopolize all her son's thought. No, she wouldn't allow it. As long as this person was dead, Yoon would become the same as before. As long as she was dead, everything would be fine. Moreover, Yoon wouldn't suspect that she did it on purpose. If she wanted to blame someone, she could only blame her bad luck for accidentally falling into the lake and dying. Therefore, Yoon Jin immediately put away her sorrow and smiled coldly. Why are you in a daze? Throw her down. Seeing the shadow guards closing in on Gong Yimo, her twisted heart felt much better. That's right. Why was she the only one suffering? Others should also have a taste of this feeling. Gong Yimo was defeated by Yoon Jin's strong logic. Initially, she felt that a weak person couldn't suddenly become brave. Sure enough, she was a pervert. This Yuheng Imperial Palace was really a training ground. Indeed, she sympathized with Yoon Jin's suffering. However, just like how she hated her for no reason, this pain shouldn't be blamed on her. Therefore, she wasn't afraid to make a move. Anyway, her interests were firmly tied to Kim Yoon's. As long as she didn't hurt Yoon Jin, Kim Yoon wouldn't do anything to her. However, what she didn't know was that if it wasn't for her interests, Kim Yoon wouldn't do anything to her. When she saw that Gong Yimo's martial arts were very good, Yoon Jin's face twisted again. Since she was so powerful, why didn't she directly bring her and Yoon out of the palace to live among the commoners? If Gong Yimo knew, she would definitely kneel down to her. How could she be at the same level as now? Moreover, even now, she couldn't bring 2 people and fight against 10,000 Imperial Guards alone. Just as Gong Yimo gloomily knocked down everyone, Kim Yoon hurried over. Imperial Mother, what are you doing? Chapter 219. Kim Yoon's voice first made Yoon Jin subconsciously happy, but after hearing his words, her face darkened. Didn't Yoon say that he would only be back in 2 days? Then he came back early, was it because of this bitch? Yoon Jin looked at Gong Yimo unkindly. Since she had already been discovered, she was too lazy to pretend anymore. She just didn't like this girl, she just didn't like her. Kim Yoon hurried over. Time seemed to have given him special treatment, making him look like he was 18 years old even though he was in his 20s. It was just that things had been going smoothly for the past 2 years, and his features had become more robust. Although he was still excessively beautiful, no one would treat Jin Yoon as a woman anymore. It was just that he was frowning now, and the enchanting mole at the corner of his eye had also dimmed. Mother, why are you doing this? Kim Yoon felt that it was simply unbelievable. Didn't Yimo do enough for him and his mother? Why did his mother have to do this to Yimo? He originally thought that his mother would be able to think it through, but he didn't expect that the more he thought about it, the worse it became. Yoon, I'm doing this for your own good. In front of Kim Yoon, Yoon Jin seemed to have become that weak little cold palace woman. She was already 40 years old, but when she spoke to him, she was full of grievances. Gong Yimo didn't notice it before, but now that she saw it, she couldn't help but tremble. It wasn't like what she thought, right? Kim Yoon angrily glared at Yoon Jin, but he couldn't really do anything to her. Kim Yoon was a filial person, and this kind of thing, he would only do what he did these 2 years, guarding and hiding it at the same time. What else could he do? However, Kim Yoon was extremely disappointed when he saw the shadow guards that had yet to disperse. Mother, I don't know what you're thinking, but please don't use the harem tactics on Yimo. She's still young, and there's nothing wrong with that. His words made Yoon Jin feel her face burning. She looked at Gong Yimo angrily. Gong Yimo looked up at the sky. No matter how they quarreled, Kim Yoon was here anyway. She could save some energy. Look at her. Look. Yoon. You weren't here just now, so you don't know how she made me angry. She's not as kind as you think. She's a vicious woman. Don't be fooled by her appearance. Kim Yoon was amused. He could not help but glance at Gong Yimo. At this moment, Gong Yimo winked at him as if she was watching a good show. That quick-witted and playful look made his heart skip a beat. In the depths of his heart, there was sweetness, but more of it was bitterness. He heard his own low voice. No matter what she does, it doesn't matter. Gong Yimo heard this and raised her chin proudly. She thought that since she was not really going to marry Kim Yoon would definitely let her do whatever she wanted. However, Yoon Jin would definitely overthink this. She felt relieved. However, she ignored the lingering longing in Kim Yoon's gentle voice when he said this. However, she ignored it, but it did not mean that Yoon Jin would ignore it. She only felt that her whole body was in an ice lake, and there was a bone-piercing chill everywhere. Her son fell in love with another woman. She was going to lose her only son. No. I won't allow it. Yoon Jin was furious. She rushed in front of Kim Yoon in a few steps, and her eyes were almost spitting fire. I will naturally choose your wife for you, but I won't allow it. So what if she has your child? Don't even think about marrying such a vixen with no self-respect. Not even a concubine. Gong Yimo was enraged when she heard this. Your son might not even marry her even if he wanted to. However, Kim Yoon was stunned. He stuttered and asked carefully, what child? So her son did not know? Yoon Jin said angrily, this vixen said she's pregnant with your child. Gong Yimo had wanted to explain, but since she did not know how to appreciate her kindness, she wanted to make her angry. As she thought about this, she took a few steps forward and held Kim Yoon's hand. She smiled and said, why? I want to marry him. This is your son's first child. If Kim Yoon succeeds the throne in the future, he will be the crown prince. How dare you? Yoon Jin's voice changed. Could it be that she was enduring so much just to pave the way for this bitch's child? The more irritable she was, the more pleased Gong Yimo was. Kim Yoon finally came back to his senses. He looked deeply at Gong Yimo, but did not withdraw his hand. Stop fooling around. He sounded sweet and helpless. Gong Yimo pouted unhappily. She started it. Only then did Jin Yun sigh and look at his imperial mother. Mother, Yimo lied to you. She's not pregnant. We are not what you think. Gong Yimo made a face at Kim Yoon. I didn't say that. She imagined it herself. However, Yoon Jin did not refute her. She only looked at Kim Yoon and asked seriously. Then do you dare to say that you don't like her at all? Yoon Jin pointed her finger at Gong Yimo. Of course. He did not like her, he did not know why, but this was not the first time he said this, but it was harder to say it. Of course what? Yoon Jin's eyes were cold as she pressed on. The atmosphere in the lake pavilion was so strange. I don't like her. Kim Yoon took a deep breath and said slowly. However, after saying this, he felt as if all the strength in his limbs had been sucked out. His chest began to hurt, giving him the urge to roar and tell the world. What he said just now was a lie. Mother and son were connected. Yoon Jin was almost certain that Kim Yoon was lying. Her heart turned cold. But now, she could not expose him. After calming down, she became much smarter. Looking at Gong Yimo, she was afraid that she did not know about her son's feelings. If she exposed him and facilitated this matter, then she would regret it so much that her intestines would turn green. However, she looked at Gong Yimo seriously. This person could not be left alive. She occupied a very important position in Yoon's heart. She could feel it. Why? Wasn't the most important person to Yoon her, his imperial mother? Kim Yoon only treated it as if the misunderstanding had been resolved and was about to leave with Gong Yimo. Gong Yimo was naturally eager and hurriedly followed. Only a dozen shadow guards and the beautiful imperial consort Yoon were left in the pavilion. When Gong Yimo turned around, she asked curiously, Your imperial mother looks very weak. How did she do it when so many shadow guards listened to her? After all, she spoke and acted so fearlessly just now. It proved that whether or not these shadow guards were sent by the emperor to protect her, they were now her people. When Kim Yoon heard her words, his face darkened. How could his imperial mother make these people so loyal? This reason, he did not want to say. Fortunately, Gong Yimo was just asking casually and walked ahead of him. Her black hair and snow-white fur clashed together. The exposed skin was as gentle as the clouds. Kim Yoon suddenly thought of what his imperial mother said just now. If we really have a child, that would be good. Yimo did not have any feelings for him. Even if she was drunk, it was impossible. Thinking of this, his eyes dimmed. In the depths of his heart, there was a trace of unwillingness, but he quickly suppressed it. Chapter 220. When Yoon Jin came back, she was so angry that she smashed everything she could. It was hard to imagine that she would become such a person. After she was done, she called someone in. This person turned out to be one of the shadow guards from before. If Gong Yimo had seen his true face, she would have known that he was the assassin that Li Ku had intercepted her in the pass. Jianxi. Did you see her clearly? This seemingly random sentence actually had a deeper meaning behind it. It turned out that Yoon Jin had been wary of Gong Yimo for a long time. She had spent 2 whole years looking for her true identity, but just a few days ago, this person had sent someone to visit her and said that he might know who Gong Yimo was. However, Gong Yimo appeared and disappeared mysteriously, so he couldn't meet her. That was why he came to the pavilion today to ask him to identify her. So, Gong Yimo didn't enter the palace just to vent her anger. Kim Yoon and Gong Yimo sometimes underestimated Yoon Jin. Or rather, even if she did things badly, they didn't guard against her. That was why things turned out this way. When Jianxi heard this, he smiled sinisterly. Without a doubt, she is the Chaoyang princess who is being hunted down by Dai Yu State. Even though Yoon Jin was prepared, she couldn't help but be shocked when she heard this answer. She actually has such a powerful background. Her face revealed a mixture of joy and jealousy, and she didn't speak for a long time. It was fine when she was in the cold palace, but now that she had become an imperial concubine, her ears had opened up a little. Especially in the past few years when she was looking for Gong Yimo's identity, she had heard a lot of news about women. The one she heard the most was this Chaoyang princess. When she first heard about the Chaoyang princess, She was very impressed because she was simply a woman who had reached the pinnacle. However, that was also because the Chaoyang princess wasn't by her side and had nothing to do with her. Now, the Chaoyang princess had become Gong Yimo. She felt quite upset. She had to think about how to deal with this matter. Genshi looked at Yoon Jin's thoughtful expression and suddenly loosened his grip on his collar. He wasn't bad looking. His skin was fair, but there was a long scar on his chest. How did this scar come about? How did he get forced out of Daiyu state? In the end, it was all related to Li Ku. Since Li Ku tried so hard to protect her and almost caused him to die, then the opportunity was right in front of him. He had to kill her. Yoon Jin was a little confused when she saw Genshi taking off his clothes. What are you doing? Didn't you say that as long as I became your highness's secret guard, I would be able to serve your highness's bed? Let me serve you. If Gong Yimo was here, she would definitely praise Yoon Jin for being a genius. In order to make the emperor's secret guards listen only to her, she actually slept with all of them to show her disgust towards the emperor. This way, even if someone wanted to accuse her of seducing the emperor, they would have to be alive to do so. After all, sleeping with her was equivalent to cuckolding the emperor. Therefore, they could only listen to her. Seeing Genshi taking the initiative, Yoon Jin was also tired of the emperor's weak body. She really didn't resist and let him do whatever he wanted. This was not like Empress Dowager Yu Qi. Ever since she heard about Empress Dowager Yu Qi's deeds, she was clearly heading in that direction. No wonder when Gong Yimo asked Kim Yoon previously, Kim Yoon refused to say. So, there was a reason behind it. At this moment, Gong Yimo didn't think about these things at all. Because there were more important things to do. After leaving the Yuheng Palace, they went home. Gong Yimo was a little excited because this time, Kim Yoon must have brought back good news. Quick, let me see. Gong Yimo couldn't wait in the carriage. Kim Yoon sighed but still took out a few bricks for her to see. He didn't understand why Yimo would spend so much money to make refractory bricks. Because the current temperature didn't meet Yimo's requirements, the cost of making these bricks was even more expensive than gold. Gong Yimo even built a tunnel kill for these bricks. The project was huge and spent a lot of manpower and money. Gong Yimo hugged the bricks happily. Now you complain that these things are expensive. In the future, I'll let them burn gold for you to see. Kim Yoon patted her head. If you want to burn gold, you should be mining gold, but you're mining coal. How is this burning gold? Gong Yimo smiled mysteriously. These things would be of great use in the future, but right now, the mining progress in various places was very slow because it was very dangerous, so the demand for minerals had to be slow. However, the appearance of refractory bricks still made her very happy. Now, the highest temperature in Daiyu State smelting technology was 1300. With the refractory bricks, the temperature could be as high as 1500. Then, whether it was steel or other metal materials, it would be a piece of cake. Unfortunately, plans couldn't keep up with changes. She also didn't expect that a weak girl would become like this when she was angry. After the two returned to the mansion, they both breathed a sigh of relief. Gong Yimo couldn't stand Yoon Jin's prying eyes. Kim Yoon felt that only when he returned home and saw her, his heart would feel better. Yimo, I'm sorry that I couldn't make it back for your birthday. This is your birthday present. Kim Yoon suddenly said in Gong Yimo's courtyard. A present. Gong Yimo's eyes sparkled when she heard this. She took the brocade box from Kim Yoon with anticipation. She was stunned. She took out a dazzling necklace. Her beautiful eyes were wide open. She looked very shocked. You actually managed to burn it out, colored glass. The ancient method of making colored glass had always been very laborious. There were more than 10 processes, so it was only used by the royal family. However, Gong Yimo knew that using her method of burning colored glass would greatly reduce the cost of producing colored glass when it reached a certain scale in the future. It was also a way to make money. However, she wasn't short of money now, so she put it aside and let Kim Yoon focus on the matter of refractory bricks. Without a foundation, it was already very difficult for him to figure out these things. She didn't expect him to have the time and effort to get colored glass out. He even specially made a present for her. She was really touched. Kim Yoon had always been a thoughtful and considerate man. "Let me put it on for you." When he said this, Kim Yoon became nervous for no reason. He was afraid that Gong Yimo would reject him. However, this colored glass necklace wasn't easy to obtain. He worked almost day and night. Under the supervision of both sides, he only slept for 4 hours a day before he was able to improve the ancient method and burn colored glass without delaying the progress of the refractory bricks. He didn't know, would she like it? Gong Yimo was surprised by this second surprise. Without another word, she turned around and let Kim Yoon put it on for her. She even lifted up her black hair, revealing her delicate and white neck. Kim Yoon looked at the smooth jade-like skin. It was almost faintly glowing. His Adam's apple moved. He suppressed the thoughts in his heart and put the necklace on. Chapter 221. It was inevitable that his fingers would touch Gong Yimo's neck. At that moment, he was like a bird startled by the twang of a bow. His fingers immediately retracted. However, that warm touch made him wonder if he had just touched a piece of warm jade. This thought made his heart itch. Thus, when he was putting it on, he deliberately touched it again to make sure that the touch just now was not his imagination. This set of warm jade, who would benefit from it in the future? This thought made his face burn. At this moment, Gong Yimo had already put down her hair and turned around. "Do I look good?" Her long eyelashes fluttered, her ink-like hair, pure white clothes, and the colorful glass on her neck. What could be more beautiful than her? Kim Yoon could not help but stare blankly. He watched her grow from a budding young girl to a beauty that could cause the downfall of a city. He could not control himself more and more. "You look good." His voice was low and hoarse, but Gong Yimo did not notice that she was very happy to receive the gift. She was fiddling with it happily. Jin Yoon had an inferiority complex when it came to her. This inferiority complex had caused him to not dare to confess his love to her. She was an extraordinary woman who fought against the country alone. He was a prince who put down his dignity as a man to become a singer in order to earn money. She had saved him time and time again. Twice, she had saved his dignity and soul. Her kindness was like a new life. And she, while developing herself, had unreservedly guided him. It could be said that his current achievements were all because of Gong Yimo, therefore, he did not have any ego in front of her. He knew very well that he was not worthy of Gong Yimo. Therefore, because of this inferiority, he endured for 3 years. In the depths of his heart, he only hoped that she could stay in Yuheng for a little longer, just a little longer. This memory was the most precious thing to him. But now, in her courtyard, under the blooming plum blossoms, she held the glass with her fingertips and looked at it in the winter sun. The sunlight shone through the glass and left a colorful glow on her face. She smiled, but all the gorgeous background was overshadowed by her. Such a person like her. Why couldn't he have her? Kim Yoon's heart was beating like thunder. This was the first time he questioned himself like this. Then, he was shocked by himself. With such a fearful and bold idea in mind, Kim Yoon no longer avoided her like before. Instead, he carefully approached her and tested her opinion of him. It must have been terrible. If it wasn't for her, he would have been sent to Lu Yi. His life and death were uncertain. His face would have been disfigured, and his mother would have been bullied. That was why she had never revealed any romantic feelings for him. She had always treated him as a friend. In the past, whenever he thought of these things, the heat in his heart would quickly be suppressed by his inferiority complex. But now, when he looked at Gong Yimo's serious little face, that inferiority complex seemed to be completely blinded by some kind of desire. It made him restless and almost unable to restrain himself. After so many years, there was only one person that he loved deeply. He really wanted to grab it. It didn't matter if he wasn't worthy of her, he would treat her well. He would listen to her for the rest of his life. As compensation, stay in Yuheng and promise him for the rest of his life. Being stared at by Kim Yoon like this, Gong Yimo looked up in puzzlement. "Are you just going to stand there like this? Didn't you say that you would help me beat the milk? Take it, just beat it like this. This will be used to make cream later. It will take a long time to beat it." If you feel tired, let someone else do it. After saying this briskly, Gong Yimo prepared to make the cake base. She had done this before, so she was very familiar with it. She was just suddenly hungry and wanted to eat cake. That sweet and soft texture was simply too good. Kim Yoon quickly took it. I can do it. Then, just like how Gong Yimo had done earlier, he kept beating the cream. There were only the two of them in the kitchen. Kim Yoon cherished the time he could spend with her, so when they were at home, no one would disturb them. Kim Yoon had a good temper, but if they offended him, they would die miserably. In everyone's eyes, Miss Shiyu was obviously his only taboo. After half a day, all the basic work was done. Next was Gong Yimo's favorite part, which was spreading the cream and framing the flowers. She very extravagantly used deerskin as a tool to make the cream. She also added pumpkin, yellow flower juice and some other original liquid to make the cream into different colors. Kim Yoon couldn't help with this step, so he just watched from the side. The whole kitchen was filled with the aroma of the cake, and she was wholeheartedly framing the flowers on the cake. That little look of hers was so serious and cute that it made him want to kiss her. This thought made the lust that he had tried so hard to suppress boil again. Kiss her. He had never had a chance to be so intimate with her, but he really wanted it, so much so that, just thinking about it made his heart beat like thunder, and he was afraid that Gong Yimo would hear it. When he thought about how the ring would be sent over tonight, he was very nervous. The ring was something that Gong Yimo had told him by chance. After knowing its use, he had an idea. Tonight, he would give the ring to Yimo, to see how she felt about it. She helped him so much. Maybe, to him, she also had feelings for him. Kim Yoon thought with uncertainty. He was already in his 20s, but when he thought about it, he felt his face heat up. Gong Yimo made a sound of surprise and looked at him puzzledly. Do you feel that the kitchen is too hot? Do you want to go out and get some fresh air? Kim Yoon quickly shook his head, but he saw that she had already finished the cake, and what she had drawn was none other than a cartoon version of himself. It was all because her drawing was too special. That cinnabar mole under the big eyes, wasn't that him? Gong Yimo smiled slyly. Let's go. I'll bring you to try the world's most delicious little Kim Yoon cake. Her words clearly did not have a trace of ambiguity, but when Kim Yoon heard it, his face suddenly burned. Fortunately, Gong Yimo was walking in front and did not notice it at all. The winter sun was not scorching at all. They had been busy for the whole morning and afternoon, just for this stutter. It had to be said that this was the highest level of gluttony. Unlike Gong Dai and Gong Che, Kim Yoon really liked sweets. However, he knew that Gong Yimo also liked sweets, so every time he was present, the sweets would go into Gong Yimo's stomach, causing Gong Yimo to think that he did not like sweets. Under the coercion, Kim Yoon helplessly took a bite of the cake and was immediately conquered by the taste. This was definitely the best dessert he had ever eaten in his life. There was no other. Seeing Kim Yoon's slightly widened eyes, Gong Yimo was proud. Now you know that desserts are delicious. It's okay, I'll make more delicious desserts for you in the future. For some reason, her words reminded Kim Yoon of the ordinary families, where the wife would wash her hands to cook soup. His heart skipped a beat, and he took a big bite. Chapter 222. Fat. Gong Yimo laughed. You don't have to be so impatient. She pointed at the corner of his mouth. Seeing that he was confused, she reached out and wiped the cream off the corner of his mouth. The place where she touched seemed to have been electrocuted. He quickly stepped back, but his body was still numb from the shock. He stared at her in a daze. Seeing that he had such a big reaction, Gong Yimo was puzzled. She wiped her hands with a handkerchief and said, Please, do you have to be so surprised? Aren't I just trying to protect your image? If people see that you're so anxious that your face is stained with cream because of your stuttering, your image will be ruined. She explained casually while eating the cake. She narrowed her eyes in satisfaction, just like a big cat, under the sun, lazy and at ease. The hand holding the spoon, the knuckles were as white as jade. Just now, she used this hand to touch the corner of his mouth. Kim Yoon didn't know if it was because he liked someone, but he liked Gong Yimo, but he couldn't even resist a casual move from her. If in the future, they really got together, what should he do? Jin-yoon thought to himself, half sweet and half worried. He was probably the one who lacked authority, wasn't he? At this moment, his subconscious had completely blocked out all possibilities because he didn't want to think about those things at all. He didn't want to think about those things that would make him feel pain. He was already surrounded by happiness. As long as she was around, every moment was like this. Was this considered entering the devil's barrier? At this moment, someone walked in. When Kim Yoon saw the person, he subconsciously glanced at Gong Yimo. The person smiled ambiguously and respectfully handed a brocade box to Kim Yoon before leaving. He thought to himself, His Highness is finally going to make a move. They had been waiting for this day for a long time. Gong Yimo asked curiously, "What is it?" Kim Yoon hurriedly kept the box in his arms. "It's nothing. It's just a ring." But it couldn't be now. When Yimo talked about the ring, she said that it was romantic. She even explained the meaning of the word to him. What was romantic? He thought on his own. With flowers and water, was that romantic? With the moonlight and wine, was that romantic? But it seemed like something was missing. He thought seriously and suddenly thought of a wonderful idea, so when the sky just turned dark, he couldn't hold back. He was very anxious to bring Gong Yimo to a place. It was late at night and it was so cold. Gong Yimo didn't want to go out, but seeing that Kim Yoon was in high spirits, she could only risk her life to accompany the gentleman. She didn't expect Kim Yoon's to bring her to a folk music hall. Kim Yoon's were the best layout and the best scenery. That must be the music hall. The music hall they came to was a place where high officials and nobles gathered. The decorations inside were elegant. There were fake mountains, flowing water, and river lights. The unmelted snow glowed under the lights. It was like the most exquisite garden in the south. The only difference was that there was an open-air stage with luminous pearls. Usually, this place was crowded, but today, it was reserved by Kim Yoon. Gong Yimo laughed. "You said you wanted to come out to play, but you chased this person away. What else can I see?" Kim Yoon seemed to be a little embarrassed. He whispered, "You can still look at me." Gong Yimo was slightly stunned. This was the first time Kim Yoon had said something so suggestive to her. When she turned around, she saw that Kim Yoon had already walked up the stage step by step and was looking at her. He felt a little inferior, but when he stood there, he was very confident. Other than being attentive and having some business acumen, the only thing he could do was to dance. Gong Yimo didn't know why he suddenly wanted to dance, but she still took a peeper from one of the walls, found a chair, and sat down with a smile on her face. "Although I don't know why you're so interested, how can there be no joy when there's dancing? I'll accompany you." Kim Yoon reached out to take off the golden crown on his head and glared at her. That gaze seemed to bring him back to the time when they first met, when he was full of flirtatious feelings. "When we first met, I asked you to accompany me, but you said you didn't know anything," Kim Yoon complained. It was hard to believe that he had such a childish side. Gong Yimo touched her nose. "The only instrument I know, and I only know one song. You should be honored." Kim Yoon suddenly smiled. He casually threw the golden crown off the stage. His black hair fluttered in the wind, making it look a little messy. He didn't put on any makeup, but his exquisite facial features clearly showed that the heavens were biased. His smile made pearls pale in comparison. At that moment, Gong Yimo's hand that was holding the peeper tightened. In her mind, the words peerless elegance suddenly flashed through. She quickly gathered her thoughts and focused on holding the peeper. From the first note, Gong Yimo clearly felt that Kim Yoon's temperament had changed. It had changed to flying. In front of others, he was the careful and steady second prince. But on stage, he was a flying flower, a blooming fire. His entire person had changed. Gong Yimo didn't know why Kim Yoon was like this. She only played the peeper while watching Kim Yoon twirl and jump lightly. Her mood seemed to soar along with his dance step. His white clothes were whiter than snow. His wide sleeves fluttered in the wind, looking even better than a dancer's dancing muslin. This was also the first time that Gong Yimo found out that casual clothes were more suitable for dancing than dance clothes. No, it wasn't because casual clothes were suitable, but rather because of the dancer's skills. Lifting one's leg or spreading one's arm depended on one's foundation and sense of music. Kim Yoon's dance was amazing because he used all of his strength to show off his gentleness. It was hard to be soft, soft to be hard. It made people immersed in it and unable to extricate themselves. What Gong Yimou didn't know was that it was because of her accompaniment that he could perform so well. Every note that she played, to Kim Yoon's ears, was like she was dancing with his soul, giving him endless strength. He only wanted to give the best to Gong Yimou, but he didn't know what romance was. So dancing was the only thing that he had the most confidence in and the most certainty in. His mother had said that when he danced, he could make 10,000 people fall head over heels for him. Later on, when he quickly became the #1 beauty in the world, it proved this point. But he didn't need 10,000 people to fall head over heels for him. He only needed Gong Yimou to fall head over heels for him. So in this dance, he danced to the extreme. As expected, Gong Yimou gradually became immersed in it. She didn't even notice when the peeper music stopped. Even when Kim Yoon finished dancing, she was still immersed in it and unable to extricate herself. This was what a dancer should be like. He touched her heart and she could clearly feel his joy, cheerfulness, shyness, and determination. After the dance, Kim Yoon looked at Gong Yimou while panting slightly. His face was red and there were beads of sweat on his forehead, but his eyes were shockingly bright. He walked step by step to the front of the stage. When he saw Gong Yimou looking at him in a daze, he couldn't help but smile. His black hair fluttered in the wind and his face was peerless. It made Gong Yimou's heart suddenly skip a beat. At this moment, his beauty was impactful. It was irresistible. He took out the brocade box from his chest. With this action, he felt his heart beating faster and faster. Faster and faster. He looked into her eyes. For the first time, he showed her his heart without holding back. Gong Yimou, I like you. I've liked you for a long time. Just as he opened his mouth, someone suddenly rushed in and shouted loudly, Your Highness, it's not good. The Imperial Guards have surrounded this place. Chapter 223. The sudden voice snapped Gong Yimou out of her daze. She looked at Kim Yoon strangely, but he put the brocade box back into his arms and stared coldly at the newcomer. What's going on? Emperor Yuheng, the prince, and the Empress Dowager were all under his watch. Who was so bold? Who dared to surround him? After all, Jin Yoon was the next emperor that Yuheng had decided internally. The newcomer knelt on the ground and stammered. It's not just anyone, it's Imperial concubine. Imperial concubine mother? Kim Yoon was stunned. Why would Imperial concubine mother send people to surround him? Thinking of this, he quickly jumped off the stage and walked out. Gong Yimou also followed, but he turned around and pressed her to the ground. We still don't know what's going on, don't go out. He knew that if it really was Imperial concubine mother, she wouldn't do anything to him. Then, they must be targeting Gong Yimou. So he looked deeply at Gong Yimou. His eyes seemed to have 1,000 words, but he didn't have time to say them. Just a little bit more, and he would have been able to say those words. But it didn't matter. After he settled this matter, he had plenty of time. At this moment, the newcomer said uneasily, Your Highness, you should go and take a look. We didn't bring many people, I'm afraid they're going to rush in. Kim Yoon then looked away and steeled himself to leave. But his hand was pulled back by Gong Yimou. Wait. He turned around and saw Gong Yimou quickly pick up the golden crown on the ground. She used her clothes to carefully wipe it and looked up at him with a smile. You're Yuheng's future emperor, you can't go out like this. She looked at him like this. At that moment, her eyes seemed to be filled with stars, more than countless stars, making his heart ache. Millimeter. Squat down. She said softly. Without a word, Kim Yoon squatted in front of her. It was obviously an extremely indecent movement, but when he did it, it was always pleasing to the eye. Probably because he had practiced dancing for a long time to a certain extent, his movements not only did not have the air of gentleness, but instead had a kind of natural beauty. Gong Yimou touched his waterfall-like hair. Under the moonlight, his hair glowed softly. Then, she used her fingers to quickly tie his hair up. Perhaps it was very fast, but Kim Yoon felt that this moment was passing very slowly. He could smell the fragrance of Gong Yimo's body, and clearly feel her soft fingertips moving nimbly through his hair. Every gentle comb seemed to soothe his soul, gradually calming him down, and his heart was filled with another kind of feeling. At this moment, he suddenly felt that this was what romance was. Outside, the Imperial army was surrounding the city. The people around him were anxious, but she still remembered that he had to maintain his image and put on a crown for him. Perhaps this was not the main reason. The main reason was that she wanted to use this short period of time to calm him down so that he would not act rashly. "Don't worry, nothing will happen." Kim Yoon thought that she was worried. The moment he got up, he nodded and looked at her, saying in a low voice. Gong Yimo shook her head and said with a smile, "What will happen to me?" That's right, what could happen to her? What could be difficult for her? Kim Yoon could not help but reach out to touch her head. Finally, he smiled and walked out, leaving Gong Yimo standing there and watching his back disappear around the corner. After a while, she picked up the peeper on the ground and hung it back on the music wall. The entire wall was hung with musical instruments. She stood by the wall, looking a little desolate. Yoon Jin clearly came prepared, and she dared to be so fearless. The only possibility was that her identity had been discovered. The princess of a neighboring country, armed with a sharp weapon, hiding in Yuheng incognito. Just thinking about it made one feel uneasy. Gong Yimo could not help but laugh. So what if she was discovered? She was a famous person after all. She was still a little surprised that she was discovered at this time. When Kim Yoon went out, he saw that the people he brought had been forced to retreat to the door. He was shocked. When he appeared, everyone stopped. His people moved closer to the music hall, while the other party retreated a few steps and stood in a dark mass. The scene gradually quieted down. Under the light of the fire, one could see the cold light on the Imperial Army's armor. This made Kim Yoon's expression turn cold. He had made a mistake. He only cared about monitoring the people that he thought were a threat, but he forgot to know about his mother's every move. This time, he did not receive any news beforehand and was surrounded. It must be because his mother used him as a loophole to get the Imperial Army's token from the Emperor and let her personally command it. It was only because she was his mother that everyone did not pay attention to her, which led to the current situation. Seeing Kim Yoon come out, two people from the other party also came out. He saw his good mother supporting Jin Sheng out. Seeing Kim Yoon, Yoon Jin panicked. "Yoon, are you okay? Where is the spy from the neighboring country? Did she hurt you?" Sure enough, she already knew Yimo's identity and used this to get the token from the Emperor. Jin Yoon's heavy gaze swept towards Yoon Jin, but when he looked at her, he trembled. The words that he had prepared to say couldn't come out of his mouth. Only the crackling of the flames could be heard in the air. Because his expression was so ugly, no one dared to speak at this moment. "Who wronged you, Shiyu, she is just an ordinary woman. Imperial Mother, you've really disappointed me." Kim Yoon's words made Yoon Jin feel wronged for no reason. Her son had been bewitched by that witch. Her son used to serve her and the people wholeheartedly. Now, for a spy, he did not even care about the safety of the country. How could she say that she was not a witch? "Yoon, don't be fooled by her. She's being nice to you because of your status and ulterior motives. She is a spy. This is a conspiracy of the neighboring country. Don't be fooled again." "What have I been fooled about?" Kim Yoon asked her loudly with his eyes wide open. "When she first met me, what was my identity? What is worthy of her ulterior motives? Mother, tell me, how dare you?" The Emperor, who had been silent all this time, coughed in a low voice, and a light flashed in his eyes. "Yoon, you are getting more and more impudent. Yoon is your mother. She must be right. How can you be so stubborn?" Kim Yoon smiled coldly. "Anyway, is not a spy. You have found the wrong person. She is my benefactor." Yoon Jin could not help but ask, "You You mean Gong Yimo, right? What benefactor? She has a weapon that can overthrow the country. Even the Dai Yu state can't tolerate her. She is just a princess who has defected from a neighboring country. How good can she be? Yoon, you should hand her over." When she mentioned the weapon, Jin Sheng's eyes lit up. He said, "That's right. Yoon, hand her over. She is too dangerous. Are you going to disregard the safety of the entire Yuheng state?" Kim Yoon laughed when he heard that. "What if I say no?" Chapter 224. Jin Yoon's words immediately caused the atmosphere of the scene to become domineering and arrogant. Yoon Jin didn't expect that Yoon would still stand on Gong Yimo's side under such circumstances. What kind of bewitching potion did that bitch feed Yoon? Could it be that he wanted to betray the country? As expected, Jin Sheng was unhappy. His face darkened as he said gloomily, "You don't have the final say in Yuheng. Jin will ask again, are you going to hand her over or not?" His meaning was very clear. In order to get Gong Yimo, he didn't mind falling out with his increasingly powerful son. If Kim Yoon really angered him, he was still young anyway. It wasn't like he couldn't have a son. Kim Yoon took a deep breath. "I said, you've got the wrong person. There's no princess here. As for Yi Yu, I won't hand her over." "Then don't blame Jin for being impolite. Your Majesty." Yoon Jin quickly grabbed Jin Sheng's hand. She looked flustered and her face turned pale. "What does Your Majesty mean? Yoon is innocent. He's been deceived by that demoness." She didn't expect that Jin Sheng, who had always doted on Yoon Jin, would fling her hand away at this moment. Jin tried to persuade him with kind words and made clear the pros and cons, but he's still stubborn. Since that's the case, Jin can only let him understand who has the final say in Yuheng. "Arrest him for Jin." "Yes, Your Majesty." Yoon Jin was frightened. She didn't expect that Jin Sheng would fling her aside one day. What was even more unexpected was that Jin Sheng would actually make a move on Yoon. Weren't they here to capture Gong Yimo? Kim Yoon saw that they weren't willing to retreat. He was surrounded and couldn't mobilize his troops. Even if he mobilized his troops were far less than the emperor's. He retreated once again and locked the door. The people he brought continued to resist in front of the door. He had to think of a way to ensure Gong Yimo's safety in this short period of time. When he hurried back to the stage, Gong Yimo was sitting on the edge of the stage with her head lowered, waiting for him. The big stage set off her petite and frail figure. Kim Yoon didn't understand why so many people wouldn't let her go. She's just a woman. She had never harmed anyone. She had done countless good deeds. Why did they treat her like this? Seeing Kim Yoon's hand, Han's face's lips twitched. "What's the situation?" "They uses not to mention, he didn't need to be, he didn't matter. Jeune SSS, he SSS, SS, SSS. Since that's the case, I'll leave. They can't stop me. You don't have to worry." Gong Yimo tried to speak casually. "Moreover, I know how to disguise myself. As long as I walk out of this door today, I'll be able to leave this place very quickly." Kim Yoon knew that the truth wasn't as simple as she made it out to be. Yuheng had 50,000 imperial guards. 10,000 were guarding the imperial palace and 10,000 were in his hands. Excluding the 10,000 in the imperial guard's hands, there were 20,000 active in the capital. Once the emperor made up his mind, he would surround them. Then Gong Yimo wouldn't be able to escape. Speaking of escaping, Gong Yimo felt that she was already familiar with it. She forced a smile and patted Kim Yoon's shoulder. "It's all right. I can really do it. Take me with you," Kim Yoon suddenly said. When Gong Yimo heard this, she was stunned. However, Kim Yoon made up his mind, "If we really meet with any situation, you can kidnap me and take me out of the city. Right now, Imperial Father's only son is still intact. He won't really take my life." Gong Yimo shook her head. "I don't understand your emperor. Who knows if he wouldn't lose his mind for the sake of the little benefit she had." The noise outside was getting louder and louder. Even Kim Yoon could hear it. "There's no time. Let's go. This time, you have to listen to me." Although Gong Yimo wasn't willing, but since they were about to kill their way in, she didn't argue anymore. With a wave of her hand, a hidden sword appeared in her hand. She brought Kim Yoon up to the roof and ran towards a direction. As if to guard against her move, when she just jumped up, countless sharp arrows with cold light shot towards her. She hugged Kim Yoon and dodged. Whoosh whoosh whoosh, the rain of swords fell on the roof, making a cold sound of hitting. Gong Yimo brought Kim Yoon to hide under the roof for the time being. She said to Kim Yoon in a low voice, "I can't take you with me. It's too dangerous to take you with me." She was really afraid that she couldn't take care of him and let Kim Yoon get hurt. "No." Kim Yoon tightly grabbed her sleeve. His gaze was firm as he said, "Let's go together." Gong Yimo didn't waste any more words. Carrying Kim Yoon, she jumped up a few times and escaped. However, since Jin Sheng knew of Gong Yimo's reputation and knew of her abilities, he naturally couldn't only bring a few people. Not only did he mobilize 20,000 soldiers in the imperial city, he even took out the imperial guards in the palace to surround Gong Yimo. He promised a large sum of money and official positions, and was determined to capture her alive. However, there was no mention of missing an arm or a leg when capturing her alive. Therefore, whether it was hooks, arrows, or poisonous smoke, they used all kinds of methods to create chaos in the imperial city. They didn't care about Yoon's safety at all. "Your Majesty, Yoon is your flesh and blood. He is in Gong Yimo's hands and is obviously being held hostage by her. How can you not care about Yoon's safety?" On the horseback, Yoon Jin panicked and wanted to plead with the emperor behind her. However, for some reason, the emperor, who was always obedient to her, had a cold expression, as if he had already made up his mind. After all, she was just an inexperienced woman. She didn't know what was most important in a man's heart. First, it was power, then women. Therefore, she could only plead with all her might. Her heart was filled with regret, but Jin Sheng didn't listen to a single word. There was no reason for him not to want a woman who even the Emperor of Dai Yu State couldn't capture and wouldn't let go of. It was the legendary firearm. He had wanted to see it for himself for a long time. Gong Yimo only felt that the capital, which was supposed to be quiet, was now filled with armored imperial guard. Everywhere, there was the sound of metal scraping against metal. There was a cold and tense feeling in the air, as if a storm was coming. Every household closed their doors tightly, their hearts filled with fear. They didn't know what was happening outside, but they knew that if they went out at this time, they would definitely lose their lives. The entire imperial city seemed to have died. Even the wanderers had disappeared. Other than the imperial guards, there was no one else in sight. Gong Yimo stood on a high ground and looked down. She could only see fire dragons running around below her. People were shuttling back and forth in the streets and alleys. She could smell the burning smell of torches and kerosene. It was inexplicably irritating. She was completely surrounded. All the exits were heavily guarded. Moreover, Yuheng didn't have a moat. She couldn't escape with Kim Yoon. Moreover, this was Kim Yoon's home. She couldn't bring Kim Yoon away. Therefore, she glanced at Kim Yoon and said softly, "Let's go. Let's go back." Chapter 225. Kim Yoon tightly grasped her hand. "No, I'm useful, so you can hold me hostage now. Leave the city through the west gate, quick." "It's useless." Gong Yimo smiled and shook her head. She had already proven that Jin Sheng did not care about Kim Yoon's life in order to catch her. Even if the west gate was filled with Kim Yoon's men, there was nothing she could do. Now that Kim Yoon was not the emperor, under the emperor's strict orders, Westgate's men would not let her leave. So if Kim Yoon followed her, he would only be hurt. How can it be useless? Kim Yoon did not know what he was holding on to. He only knew that if he let go this time, he might not be able to see her again. "This is all because of my mother. I have the duty to protect you, so what if I have to sacrifice my life?" Here. Suddenly, someone discovered Gong Yimo. Before they could catch their breath, Gong Yimo continued to lead Kim Yoon away. Along the way, she didn't know how many people she had killed and how many times she had escaped from danger. Kim Yoon was in charge of leading the way. He did not believe that he could not make Gong Yimo leave the city. Seeing that the west gate was getting closer and closer, Kim Yoon hurriedly moved forward, but he was blocked by layers of soldiers. Their blades were pointed at their noses. Under the emperor's orders, anyone who dares to enter the city will be killed without mercy. Kim Yoon retreated a few steps and bumped into Gong Yimo. At this time, the soldiers chasing them were almost here. If they did not leave now, They would definitely die. Let the city leader come out to see me, Kim Yoon shouted. The city leader of the West Gate was his man. He did not believe that he could not get one person to come out. Very quickly, a tall and sturdy man appeared and knelt in front of Kim Yoon. He was one of Kim Yoon's supporters, but now that Kim Yoon was not the emperor and was at odds with the emperor because of a spy from a neighboring country, unless he did not want to live, he would definitely not open the city gate. Your Highness. Kim Yoon didn't waste any time. He took 2 steps forward, grabbed him, and hurriedly said, "Open the door. I want to go out." Your Highness, turn back. She was a spy from a neighboring country. His Majesty had already given a verbal order that whoever opened the door would be implicated. We really don't dare. Hearing Kim Yoon's words, the city leader begged in a low voice. It was already a sin for him not to give the order to take them down. If he opened the door, his entire family would die. Behind him came the sound of neat footsteps. Gong Yimo's sword was still dripping blood. She glanced at the crowd. There were hundreds of people in front of her. Even if she forced her way through, she would be surrounded before she could even kill half of them. This door. It looked like she couldn't get out. Seeing that Gong Yimo was about to turn around and leave, Kim Yoon quickly grabbed her. Where are you going? Gong Yimo wiped the sweat off his forehead and smiled bitterly as he looked at the heavy spears and blades in front of the city gate. They're almost here. I can't stay here any longer. If this doesn't work, I'll think of another way. What other way was there to think of? If Gong Yimo approached the other city gates, she would be surrounded and captured alive. Gong Yimo gently shook off Kim Yoon's hand. Don't follow me anymore. You still have a bright future ahead of you. If you follow me, don't you want everything that you've worked so hard for all these years? Go back. I'm the one who held you hostage. Go back. Her eyes turned cold and she was determined not to bring Kim Yoon along anymore. The sound of the pursuers was getting closer and closer. Even Kim Yoon could hear the danger approaching. If Yimo fell into the hands of the emperor, her fate would be miserable. He couldn't go on like this. As if he had made up his mind, Kim Yoon suddenly said, I'll open the city gate for you. Gong Yimo saw that he was going to get the key from the city leader. She quickly grabbed him and said angrily, Are you crazy? If you open the gate, the emperor won't let you go. Jin Yoon actually broke free from her grip and smiled faintly at her. Isn't it just implicating 9 generations? Father is the leader of the 9 generations. If he's not afraid, what do I have to be afraid of? No. Gong Yimo wanted to pull him away, but Kim Yoon was determined. He walked over and took the key from the neck of the city leader who was kneeling. Gong Yimo blocked him. At this moment, she couldn't care less about the imperial guards who were about to catch up. She forcefully pulled him away. No. I won't allow it. There must be another way. You're not allowed to do anything stupid. However, Jin Yoon turned around and pulled her forward. The soldiers who had been heavily surrounded couldn't help but back away. They weren't as crazy as the imperial army and didn't dare to harm Jin Yoon. Thus, they staggered back and opened up a path for Jin Yoon. My life was given to me by you. If I let you go, I won't be able to continue living. Then, I'm not worthy of your concern, he said firmly to Gong Yimo. I didn't do all these years for nothing. Now, they just caught me off guard. When the sun rises, I have my ways. Nothing will happen. At this moment, the imperial guards were already a few hundred meters away. She didn't have time to run even if she wanted to. Gong Yimo gritted her teeth. While her thoughts were in a mess, she was already dragged to the city gate. After the huge key was inserted into the city gate, Kim Yoon used a lot of effort to turn on the mechanism on the city gate. The gate slowly opened. The dull sound knocked on everyone's heart. He really opened the city gate. At this moment, Gong Yimo suddenly recalled her previous life. In order to not make things difficult for her, and also to be disheartened by Yuheng, he personally opened the city gate to let her in. In the end, he was crushed to death by the Yuheng emperor. Kim Yoon. She grabbed his arm in a panic. In her eyes, there was a panic that Kim Yoon had never seen before. I'll be fine. His heart warmed as he gently comforted her. His eyes were fixed on her. Then, he held Gong Yimo's hand and endured the pain in his heart. Heartless. He pushed her out of the gate. Kim Yoon. The city gate only opened a small crack before Kim Yoon blocked the entrance. Gong Yimo hurriedly turned around, but she couldn't see anything behind him. She could only hear the sound of approaching footsteps, horse hooves, and noise. At this moment, she seemed to hear Jin Sheng's angry roar. She couldn't leave like this. Rather than letting Kim Yoon stay behind and suffer the wrath of the Yuheng Emperor, she would rather stay behind and bear the consequences of her own actions. Let's go. Kim Yoon also heard Jin Sheng's voice behind him and looked at her with determination. I'll be fine. You can at least believe me this once. I am not that weak. Gong Yimo's footsteps paused as she turned around. It was as if she went back, it would be a great blow to Kim Yoon's self-esteem. Yes, he had already opened the city gate. Whether she went back or not, Kim Yoon would not be able to escape punishment. However, escaping and being caught were two different things. In her previous life, Kim Yoon's ending was still boiling in her heart. She couldn't leave. She couldn't leave. Kim Yoon saw her like this and couldn't help but laugh. The wind blew through the city gate and tore at his hair. His golden crown had fallen off at some point. He was in a sorry state, but he was still shockingly beautiful. She didn't abandon him. She never did. She had saved him many times, so this time, it was time for him to repay her. Thus, in the moment when Gong Yimo was stunned, he slammed the city gate shut without even a word of farewell. Kim Yoon. Kim Yoon. Gong Yimo panicked and reached out to hit the city gate. However, how could her strength affect the huge city gate? Jin Yoon locked the door and leaned his back against the city gate. At this moment, he could clearly see Jin Sheng's eyes that were about to spit fire from his horse's back. He touched the small brocade box in front of his chest and smiled bitterly. Actually, he had always wanted to ask Gong Yimo one question. That was, after you leave this time, will you still come back? Unfortunately, there was no chance. Chapter 226. The next day, Gong Yimo did not leave the city. Yesterday, the city was in an uproar, so many people did not dare to go out the next day. The streets were silent, the shops were closed, the stalls were gone and the pedestrians were pitifully few. So many people who entered the city could not understand. She had only been away for a few days. How did the city change so much? At this moment, one of the few people who had just entered the city asked in a low voice. Little brother, do you know what happened? Why is there no one in the city? This was under the emperor's rule. Gong Yimo looked at the person behind her and shook her head. I'm not sure either. She was not sure what happened yesterday. At this moment, she disguised herself as a young man and easily sneaked into the city. Looking at the quiet streets, she frowned and casually found a place to stay. Very quickly, a few days passed. In these few days, Gong Yimo heard a lot of news. For example, Kim Yoon was demoted and the imperial concubine pleaded for mercy. For example, the Empress Dowager intervened and reprimanded the imperial concubine. For example, an assassin suddenly appeared in the palace, the imperial concubine was injured and the emperor was assassinated, causing his illness to relapse. Gong Yimo had always known that Jin Sheng's illness was strange and now it seemed even more suspicious. At this moment, she was drinking tea in a tea house. A few days had passed and because of what happened that night, the tea house was very quiet. Suddenly, a cheer came from afar. She looked out of the window and saw a man running over excitedly, shouting as he ran. The second prince has been restored. What? The voice was like a prairie fire, causing many tightly shut doors to open. That's great, I knew it. The second prince is such a good person, how could anything happen to him? I heard that there were assassins in the palace last night and the emperor is sick. This morning, many corpses were thrown out. Could this have something to do with the second prince's restoration? Otherwise, why would His Majesty be so angry and let him out so easily? Discussions were incessant, but most of them were happy that Kim Yoon had escaped. Gong Yimo finally smiled for the first time in a few days. She lowered her head and drank her tea. Originally, she was waiting to save Kim Yoon if he was in danger. Who would have thought that Kim Yoon's hard work over the past few years was not in vain? In just a few days, He had turned the tables around. She stood up, thinking that he was about to return to the prince's palace. If she went back now, she might just meet him. Just when Gong Yimo wanted to go back and have a good rest, her heart suddenly skipped a beat. She heard her neighbor talking, and she happened to be talking about her. I've heard that your highness was punished by his majesty because your highness let go of a spy from a neighboring country. Spy? Yes. She seemed to be the princess of a neighboring country. Because she has a powerful weapon, even the emperor of Dai Yu state can't tolerate her. How can a woman be so capable? It's really too scary. Fortunately, she left. But his highness is such a good person, how could he let a spy go? Gong Yimo looked at the person beside her. Even though they said the same thing and used the same words, Yuheng was still Yuheng. No matter how good this place was, it was still not her home. This realization made Gong Yimo unable to regain her senses for a long time. Why must she stay here? Finally, as if she had made up her mind, she looked determined and walked out. However, she wasn't going to the prince's palace. Instead, she walked out of the city. At the same time, a pale Kim Yoon pulled open the curtains of the carriage and looked outside. These few days, he didn't have a good time. It could be said that he had almost died. Although in the end, he managed to make a comeback, but the danger in this was not something that outsiders could understand. At least at that time, when he pushed Gong Yimo away, he was prepared to die. At that time, when Jin Sheng saw that he had let go of Gong Yimo, he took out his horsewhip and gave him a good beating. Now, his body was full of whip marks. When he was in prison, he almost died from the fever. Now, he was just slightly better. Fortunately, he had been working hard for the past few years. In the end, he was able to come out alive. Now that Jin Sheng was seriously ill, Yuheng was really Kim Yoon's word. If he had known that this would happen, even if he had to bear the infamy of being unfilial, he would have done so long ago. But now, it was too late for regrets. He only hoped that Yimo would hear about his news and come back to find him. After all, there was no place for her in Dai Yu state. This time, he had the ability to protect her. As long as she came back, this kind of thing would not happen again. But, where was she? When she was leaving the city, Gong Yimo looked back. She had lived in this city for almost 3 years. Speaking of which, she was a little reluctant to leave. However, she should go back. If she stayed here, she would only cause trouble for Kim Yoon. Since he was fine, she should also do her own things. After all, they were still working together, right? Gong Yimo retracted her gaze, lowered her head, and left. She never liked the restrictions of her identity, nor did she like to be controlled by others. But now, she had enough of the days of hiding her identity. At this time, she looked in the direction of Dai Yu state and smiled faintly. The Chaoyang princess was her. Why couldn't she go back? Dai Yu State Imperial Palace. In the study of Jiaoyang Palace, everyone was as silent as cicadas in winter, not daring to make a sound. Gong Cheng was practicing his calligraphy, but his writing was not smooth. Countless balls of paper were thrown on the ground, but no one dared to come forward to clean them up. Chang Shi looked on coldly from the side. He saw that the last stroke of a good character was not written properly. Gong Cheng's thick eyebrows furrowed. Once again, he crumpled the paper into a ball and threw it on the ground. He threw the cinnabar pen away angrily. Chang Shi quickly waved his hand and smiled. Your Highness has been writing for more than 2 hours. Take a break and drink some tea. As he spoke, he handed the tea that was always prepared in the hands of the palace servants to Gong Cheng. Gong Cheng glanced at him and took a sip of tea. As a result, it was unknown how he was angered, but he suddenly threw the teacup on the ground. Bang! All the palace servants knelt down, especially the little palace maid who had just delivered the tea. She was so scared that her face turned pale as she crawled at the feet of the emperor. Your Majesty, please spare my life. Your Majesty, please calm down. Gong Cheng sneered. Calm down, calm down. You don't even know why I'm angry, so what's there to be angry about? No one dared to answer his words. Only Chang Shi sighed and waved his hand to dismiss everyone. His bold action did not anger the emperor. The palace servants looked at Chang Shi gratefully and quickly retreated. Changshi saw Gong Cheng sitting on the dragon throne angrily and smiled fawningly. Your Highness, are you angry with Yuheng and his gang? Gong Cheng glared at him. You know very well in your heart. Changshi quickly smiled apologetically and did not speak. He only needed to open his mouth and let the emperor vent his depression. He did not need to express any opinions first. That bunch of useless cowards. What's the point of bullying a child? They even sent a large number of soldiers to surround her. They even said that she was a spy from Daiyu State. Ridiculous. Is Yuheng worthy of me sending a princess as a spy? Chapter 227. Speaking of this, Changshi couldn't help but laugh. So in your Majesty's heart, the princess has always been a princess. Emperor Cheng directly lifted his foot and kicked him. You're getting bolder and bolder. You dare to say anything. Slap your mouth. Changshi quickly patted his face twice. Look at this slave's broken mouth. Your Majesty, please calm down. Don't lower yourself to this slave's level. Emperor Cheng glared at him again, then frowned. After a long time, he sighed. That girl really can't stay idle. She turned Yuheng upside down. The Yuheng emperor is bedridden. It seems that this regime, because of her, it will change. Changshi couldn't help but think of the little girl who always wanted to snatch the horsetail whisk from his hand when she was still young. She was delicate and smart. So many years had passed in a flash. That girl should be 17 now, right? The emperor thought the same as him. Thinking of this, Moa should also be 17 now. He narrowed his eyes and smiled. 17 is a big girl. Unfortunately, no one restrained her. She probably didn't remember that she was still a girl and wanted to marry. It was obviously a scolding, but when she said it, there was a deep sense of nostalgia. I don't know what she looks like now. Changshi smiled. The princess has looked like imperial concubine Shui since she was young. When she grows up, she will naturally be a beauty. His flattery was comfortable, making Emperor Cheng very happy. But when he thought of her current situation and the turmoil in the past few years, he couldn't help but sigh. You say, they are all my children. Why are they all so different? Changshi knew that His Majesty missed the princess. Secondly, he was still sad for the 4 princes who died. Especially in the past few years, the competition between the princes became more and more obvious, so the emperor's laughter was much less than before. Your Highness, don't be sad. You still have many children. They are all very filial to you. Other than this, there was nothing else to say. The harem was fierce, but wasn't the imperial court tragic? If they died, it could only mean that their skills were not as good as others. They didn't have this blessing. However, those who were still alive still had to think on the bright side. Gong Cheng suddenly laughed. If that girl is by my side, not only will she not comfort me, I'm afraid she will also mutter. Making you give birth to so many children, you regret it. Gong Cheng imitated Gong Yimo's tone when suddenly, his face turned bitter. But, where is she now? There was no overnight enmity between father and daughter. Even if he was very angry, even if she was not his biological child, the feelings he had for her were no less than any biological child. She was so smart and cute, how could anyone not like her? How could anyone be jealous of her? How could this be? Gong Yimo touched her ears. They hadn't gone back yet. Did someone miss her? She looked up at the tall city gate in front of her and clicked her tongue. Deep in her heart, there was some nostalgia. So, she actually treated Daiyu State as her hometown? Unfortunately, she couldn't just go in like this. There were too many people in Daiyu State who knew her. Who knew if there were people who were proficient in the art of disguise? Even if she wasn't afraid of anything, it was better to avoid unnecessary trouble. After all, she had just caused such a big ruckus in Yuheng. Many people must have heard the news and were investigating near the city gate. She had just entered this gate, and if she revealed a slight flaw, countless people would be alerted. When that time came, don't talk about entering the palace, she might not even be able to reach the city center. Indeed, people were afraid of fame while pigs were afraid of being fat. Wait, what kind of lousy metaphor was this? Moreover, she definitely couldn't go back like this. The problem of her virginity hadn't been solved yet. Fortunately, she had done many things in the past few years, so she had a plan. Now, she only lacked a foolproof plan to gain the emperor's approval. Moreover, she couldn't give others a chance to intercept her. This was really a bit of a headache. Therefore, Gong Yimo wandered around the city gate of Dai Yu State's capital a few times, but in the end, she couldn't enter. After a few days, the sun was just right. In the Qi Palace, Gong Dai seemed to sense something and looked out the window. Now that the pawnshops along the river have been taken down, the only thing left is to rebuild them into a bank. With the water from the canal, it's not hard to imagine how lucrative the profits will be. Look, there are many people who have the intention to cooperate and are lining up to visit with money. These are all silver that has been delivered to your doorstep. It would be a waste if you don't take it. Your Highness, what do you think? After Bai Sheng finished speaking with a smile, he saw that Gong Dai was distracted. He was a little surprised. Your Highness. His voice made Gong Dai glance at him like lightning. Bai Sheng was so shocked that he almost knelt down. Your Highness, is there something wrong? Gong Dai ignored him and only asked, how is the cooperation with Yuheng going? Gong Dai had thought of the possibility of rapid development. If he could cooperate with Yuheng's Golden Jade Bank, which was maturing day by day, and achieve the exchange of banknotes, the union of the two countries would definitely be a magnificent feat. Not only would investors flood in like water, it would also be beneficial to him. Bai Sheng was a little puzzled. Your Highness, didn't you read Yuheng's secret report a few days ago? Their country has been in turmoil recently, and second Prince Yuheng is recuperating from his injuries. I'm afraid this matter will have to be delayed. Why was the prince so distracted today? For the diligent prince, this was something that had never happened before. Gong Dai also realized that he was abnormal. That's right, he had long known that something had happened to Yuheng. Yuheng had turned the world upside down to look for that person. During that period of time, he had almost gone to Yuheng. The person they were looking for was the royal sister. But in the end, Yuheng didn't find her. So where could she have gone now? When he thought that Gong Yimo couldn't have returned to Dai Yu State, it was possible that she had gone to Lu Yi or Yu Qi, which was even further away. He felt a stuffy feeling in his chest. He couldn't wait to kidnap her and bring her back. He rubbed his forehead. For some reason, his heart was even more restless. Were there any problems in the capital today? Problems? Bai Sheng thought for a moment. In reply to Your Highness, there wasn't any news today. Is that so? Gong Dai's cold eyes swept out the window again. Why do you feel so restless? Bai Sheng smiled. It's probably because Your Highness has been too tired recently and needs to rest more. Gong Dai didn't answer him. It seemed that he was distracted again. Bai Sheng naturally didn't speak again. He waited on the side. Thanks to the princess, he was someone the princess had sent to the prince. Thus, the prince had placed him in an important position these past few years. He was also one of the few strategists who could interact with the prince like this. In front of most people, the prince had an imposing aura. He didn't need to open his mouth to make people keep quiet out of fear. But in front of these people, the prince was actually very easy to get along with, other than his cold personality. Looking at the prince's appearance, it seemed that he was missing the princess again, right? The word love was a motivating force, but wasn't it also a sharp weapon that hurt people's hearts? Just as he was about to leave silently, someone hurriedly rushed in. Watch out! He really barged in. Bai Sheng turned pale with fright. Did this person not want to live anymore? Little Seven couldn't hold back his surprise and didn't care anymore. Your Highness, there was an explosion outside the city. It seems that the princess has returned. Chapter 228. Little Seven's words were like a clap of thunder, making the other two people in the room unable to regain their senses for a long time. Bai Sheng dug his ears. Could he have heard wrongly? He was just about to ask Little Seven to repeat himself when he heard the sound of the door opening and His Highness disappeared. His speed was as fast as a gust of wind. Don't just stand there. It's really the princess. Isn't it said that only the princess has the ability to shake the heavens and earth? Bai Sheng slapped his head fiercely. Then what are you still standing there for? Quickly bring someone to look for His Highness. With a few claps of thunder, This news seemed to have grown wings as it spread throughout the entire capital. When the emperor heard this, he sat up in surprise. But as he thought of something, he sat back down with a sullen face and snorted, "Since she's so capable, why did she come back? Why, she can't stay outside, so she knows to come back. What kind of place does she take Shen's palace for?" Chang Shi didn't know whether to laugh or cry when he heard this. "Your Majesty, why are you still talking about this at this time? Quickly bring her back is the most important thing. There are many people who are coveting the princess." The emperor snorted, "Isn't she very capable? She can't even enter the palace. What kind of princess is she?" Yes. Chang Shi's face was full of smiles. The emperor's meaning was very clear. Once she entered the palace, this princess would definitely be the princess. But when the emperor was happy, naturally there would be people who were unhappy. Empress Dowager coaxed her angry niece with a helpless face. "Yang don't worry, Imperial Grandmother will definitely avenge you. That Gong Yimo, she can forget about entering the palace." The reason why Long Hanyang could call Empress Dowager Granny was because of the Empress Dowager's honor. She doted on this niece to the bone. In just over a year's time, Long Hanyang had changed a lot. In the past, she gave people the impression of a fiery little chili. Now she was gloomy and her actions were ruthless, just like Lei Feng. One touch and one's life would be broken into pieces. There wasn't anyone in the palace who wasn't afraid of her. At this moment her face was malevolent as she added, "What's the use of not being able to enter the palace? I want her dead." Saying that, she raised her right hand, which was missing 2 fingers, her eyes filled with hatred. "Imperial Grandmother, look at my hand. The way they look at me is like looking at a cripple. It's all because of that bitch. Death is too easy for her. I want to cut off her fingers one by one and feed them to the dogs. I want to chop off her hands and feet and make her into a human swine. I want her to live a life worse than death." The Empress Dowager looked like she was having a headache. Okay, I'll do as you say. Ijia will send people to capture her and prevent her from entering the palace." At this moment, Imperial concubine Long sneered. She was looking down on this niece of hers more and more. In addition, everything had been going wrong recently, and she was in a bad mood, so she couldn't help but mock her. What will happen to Gong Yimo? Whether or not she can enter the palace depends on His Majesty's attitude. What His Majesty thinks. "Aunt, do you know?" Long Xiangxiang's words made the Empress Dowager pull a long face. "Ijia's son can only listen to Ijia. Do you think Gong Cheng is Yu Qi's puppet emperor?" Long Xiangxiang smiled and didn't say it out loud. She also hated Gong Yimo and wanted her to die. However, she was a rational person and wouldn't say it out loud. Feng Qi Palace. The Empress was naturally very happy. She had received a lot of kindness from Gong Yimo, so there was no reason for her not to be happy. However, she thought of something and narrowed her eyes, hesitating for a moment. Water deity asked, "Is your highness not happy?" The Empress shook her head. "This Cheye has yet to get married. In another 2 months, the daughter of the Su family will be removed from her clothes. This Empress is worried that her return this time will bring about unexpected changes. After all, Cheye is also coming back." Water deity was stunned and comforted with a smile. "It's okay. His Highness is no longer the His Highness of the past. Look at how good his reputation is among the people. He won't do such an irrational thing." "I hope so." Then, she ordered, "I'm afraid the journey will not be peaceful. Pass down my secret order. If it's really Gong Yimo, secretly escort her back. Otherwise, I'm worried about her being alone." Yes. Not only did the Empress Dowager send people, but the Empress also sent people. There were also many people among the princes. However, it was unknown whether they were there to pick up someone or to kill someone. The originally calm Duke Shengguo's residence also became tense. Su Miaolan's wedding dress was placed at the side. It had been embroidered long ago. Now, she only occasionally took it out to add flowers to brocade. However, after hearing the news today, she couldn't continue embroidering. Was Gong Yimo really coming back? Couldn't she die outside? Why did she come back? Su Miaolan had a deep enmity towards Gong Yimo. This enmity started when the embroidery design was stolen. Then, it became more and more intense after the Tea Party incident. She thought that such a traitor who fled the country would never appear again. She didn't expect her to have the face to come back. It was really infuriating. She angrily slammed the table and thought fiercely in her heart, "It's okay. Even if she came back this time and regained her status as a princess, she was still the crown princess. What was there to be afraid of?" However, deep in her heart, she still hoped. Weren't there so many people who wanted to snatch Gong Yimo? It would be great if she couldn't enter the palace. It was just a few claps of thunder, but everyone confirmed the identity of the person who came. They acted immediately upon hearing the news. Of course, there were also those who were unsure and held on to a sliver of hope. Gong Dai was the former. He wasn't sure. Was it really his royal sister who came back? She had already thought of a way to solve the problem and came back. Gong Dai felt his heart beating fast and then slow down. He hoped that the person who came back was really her, but he was also afraid that it wasn't her. He had experienced this feeling of worrying about personal gains and losses too many times. Gong Yimo sat on a big rock outside the city and ate some snacks. There were people all around her. The snacks were also brought by them. Not only that, there were also drinks and dishes. Unlike those in the palace, these people really liked her and were also looking forward to her return. Their eyes were full of eagerness as they looked at her. This made Gong Yimo, who was thick-skinned, feel a little embarrassed. She was surrounded by a large group of people. Even the soldiers guarding the city were dumbfounded. This was the capital's east gate. It was also the biggest gate with the most traffic. The people entering and exiting all surrounded Gong Yimo when they saw her. If this continued, it would cause congestion. "Princess, you're really back. Back then, we knew that you were so powerful that you would come back one day," a little scholar said foolishly. He looked at Gong Yimo with eyes full of longing. That's right. Princess, it's good that you're back. Daiyu State is your home. Look at you, you've lost weight in the past few years," a middle-aged woman said with heartache. She didn't lose weight. She just lost some of her baby fat. She really didn't lose weight. "Princess, you're so beautiful. You must be the most beautiful woman in the world. Since you're back, don't leave again. If any bad people bully you again, we'll protect you. Yes, we'll support you." Chapter 229. Gong Yimo's heart was moved. She really didn't expect herself to be so popular. She felt ashamed. She was the one who had forgotten what she had done. Her few simple changes had greatly improved the quality of life of the common people. Coupled with the publicity of the students, her ups and downs, and her fearless spirit, it could be said that she was the undisputed star of this era. Her influence was huge. Under the flattery of the crowd, Gong Yimo was so proud that she almost forgot herself. Why didn't she realize that she had the potential to be a star in the past? Just as she was feeling proud, the chattering crowd around her suddenly quietened down. She raised her head in bewilderment, only to see a young man dressed in black, standing there quietly. He was panting slightly, quietly, looking at her. Gong Dai. The moment Gong Yimo saw him, she felt her heart beat a few times. Because he had already grown up, Gong Dai was good-looking. Gong Yimo already knew that in her previous life. But the him in front of her was even more attractive than in her previous life. In this life, his eyes were not as dark and distorted as in her previous life. Instead, they were cold and clear. It was just that they were too black and white. His emotions could be easily expressed through those beautiful eyes, making it impossible for Gong Yimo to avoid them. His beauty was impactful. His personality was impactful. But his emotions were as gentle as water. Just by looking at that person, it was as if he wanted to drown that person. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Gong Yimo suddenly felt a little hot. Wasn't it winter? What, was spring coming? But the reason why the common people quietened down was different from her. Gong Dai's fame was no less than Gong Yimo's. The difference was that Gong Yimo was loved and respected. Gong Dai was feared. In just a few short years, the number of people who had died in the market was equivalent to the number of people who had died in the past 100 years, and during every execution, the prisoners would loudly curse Gong Dai's name. So his reputation was very loud. Even the common people knew his name, not the ninth prince or Prince Chi. Gong Dai looked at Gong Yimo. Nothing else was important. It was as if she was the only person left in the world. She really came back. He walked towards Gong Yimo, and with every step he took, it felt like he was stepping on the tip of his heart. The commoners spontaneously retreated and quickly opened up a path, allowing Gong Dai to smoothly walk to Gong Yimo's side. Because she was sitting on a huge rock, he looked up at her and couldn't help but reveal a smile. It was really her. Gong Yimo was in a daze. His smile was like snow melting, like clouds rolling in the blue sky, clean and clear. So she stared blankly at him, who was so close to her. She didn't know why, but she didn't know what to do. Was this a conditioned reflex caused by the previous events? Her dazed look put Gong Dai in a good mood. He smiled and said, "Royal sister." He called her in a low voice, so cold and gentle, as if she had never left. Gong Yimo continued to be in a daze. Her snow-white little face revealed such an adorable expression. Gong Dai couldn't help but want to hug her in his arms and rub her. He held back his thoughts and smiled as he opened his arms to her. He said in a low voice, "I'll carry you down." When Gong Yimo heard him say that he wanted to carry her, she forgot to resist. She actually reached out her hands and was carried down by him. The faint scent of peppermint wafted over. Gong Yimo then realized that it was really Gong Dai who had come. And his arms were extremely strong. His entire body was filled with power and deterrence. He had grown up. She could no longer treat him like a child. With this thought, Gong Yimo felt her heart skip a beat. The early winter sun shone on the two extremely dazzling figures. Gong Ju subconsciously wanted to hug Yimo, while Gong Yimo subconsciously stretched out her hand. The moment their hands overlapped, the sun behind them was enveloped in their embrace, emitting a bright light. They were clearly one righteous and one evil, but they were extremely harmonious. They were so beautiful that people couldn't take their eyes off them. Many people unconsciously cried out in surprise. They had never seen such a gentle side to Gong Dai. Gong Dai had always given people the impression that he was cruel, cold, heartless, and decisive. Wherever he appeared, if it wasn't confiscated, it was exterminated. It was really hard to believe that such a person could be so amiable and approachable. Were they mistaken? This person wasn't Gong Dai or Prince Chi, but someone who looked similar. The cries of the commoners brought Gong Yimo back to her senses. She gently pushed Gong Dai away and stood still. At this moment, she was stuck between Gong Dai and the huge rock. This distance was really confusing. So she moved a little to the side, and then a little more. She lowered her head and said, "Many thanks, Imperial brother." She emphasized these two words, causing many people to wake up. They almost forgot that the cold-blooded and ruthless Prince Chi was the younger brother that the princess had taken care of since she was young. No wonder the two of them had such a good relationship. When they saw that Gong Dai didn't bring a single attendant, they were obviously in a hurry. They were even more envious of their relationship and were less afraid of Gong Dai. After all, when they really interacted with him, he looked very easygoing. Gong Dai's lips curled up. He was very tolerant of Gong Yimo's little tricks. He took Gong Yimo's hand, just like how an older brother would hold his younger sister. "Let's go and see Imperial Father." Most importantly, they were so relaxed and natural that no one felt that it was out of place. Only then did the commoners remember that Gong Yimo was going to enter the palace. So they cheered happily. "The princess is going to return to the palace. The princess is going to return to the palace." This sentence spread by word of mouth and flew through the streets, causing countless responses and joy. Gong Dai was annoyed that he had left so quickly that he didn't even prepare a carriage. Who knew that the commoners were so enthusiastic? They actually drove a handcart that was usually used to transport flowers. At the front, there were two horses running side by side. At the back, there was a flat roof with parallel boards. There were only handrails that were half a person's height. It was very simple and crude. Gong Yimo naturally didn't want to leave when there was a carriage to sit in. So she lifted her skirt and wanted to get on, but was stopped by Gong Dai. He glanced coldly at the flower carriage. "How can this kind of carriage be worthy of you?" He said it as a statement. This carriage wasn't worthy of her at all. "Wait a little longer. My men will be here soon." Who knew that Gong Yimo wouldn't mind and waved her hand. "It's fine. The flat roof is airy and fun. I haven't sat in this before." As she said that, she jumped onto the carriage. Seeing that the princess really got on his family's flower carriage, the owner felt that her presence had brought light to his humble dwelling. He would never wash or use this carriage again. He wanted it to be his family's heirloom. Seeing that Gong Dai didn't get on, Gong Yimo asked him curiously. Gong Dai shook his head. "You can just sit there." The royal sister had just returned to the capital. He wouldn't leave any evidence for those people to use against her. He just needed to watch over her. As he said that, Gong Dai really crowded around the flower carriage like the other commoners and walked towards the palace step by step. Chapter 230. Both sides of the street were in an uproar. "The princess is back. The princess is back." "What? You're asking which princess? Is your brain rusty? Now that the city's sewers are everywhere, where did the clean running water come from? Where did the clean and convenient paper in everyone's hands come from? Where did the cheap and popular books come from? Who was the one who suggested building canals? Who was the one who improved the farming tools during the construction of canals? Who was the one who suggested the irrigation canals? Who was the one who allowed Dayu State to have good weather and rare natural disasters? It was all because of the princess. How could they not cheer when such a person came back? Some of the students in the school stopped studying and ran out of the school to watch. The scene of Gong Yimo faking her death 3 years ago was still vivid in their minds. The whole city was in tears at the princess's death. How many eulogies and eulogies had they written? How long had they mourned for? In the end, the princess managed to survive. Before they could cheer, they heard that she was being hunted down again. A woman who did not do anything wrong had to be on the run for 3 years. How pitiful. Many people thought that she must have thought of a way to get out of the hopeless situation. They could foresee that with the princess in the capital, it would be very lively. There weren't many fruits in the winter, so many young girls threw their handkerchiefs at the flower cart to express their joy. Gong Yimo felt dizzy when she held the handkerchief. She looked up and saw a group of young girls laughing and dispersing. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry when she disappeared into the crowd. The rich students rode their horses at the front to spread the news. There were also some who walked in the crowd to accompany the princess. The atmosphere was high, and the enthusiasm was enough to melt ice. Someone marveled at Gong Yimo's beauty and composed a poem. He sang loudly, "There is a beautiful person whose eyebrows are like willow leaves in early spring. Her eyes contain stars. Her face is like peach blossoms in March. Her smile is like 100 flowers in a banquet. Her waist is slender and her bearing is naturally elegant. Her posture is graceful, more than the limitless sun. Her jade-like appearance is like the flower of heaven. Her face is graceful and fragrant." There wasn't a single pause in his speech, and he sang it out just like that. He was completely unaware when he was singing. He looked at Gong Yimo with an infatuated gaze. There was a fanaticism in his eyes that he didn't even realize. His voice was very loud, and Gong Yimo could hear him clearly even though the scene was so noisy. Gong Yimo was very happy to be praised like this. She looked at the little scholar and smiled. "Thank you. Your literary talent is very good. You flatter me." Her smile was too beautiful to behold. It really had the feeling of a smile like a banquet of hundreds of flowers. That scholar was stunned. He thought that she wouldn't hear it, but not only did she hear it, she even replied to him. His face flushed red and he was at a loss for what to do. He did not know how to answer Gong Yimo. At this moment, other people did not want to be outdone and started to compose poems to praise her. Hearing this, Gong Yimo's face turned red and her tail was about to stick up. However, Gong Dai was not happy. He was originally in the crowd and deliberately restrained his aura so that others would not dare to approach him. But now that he coldly looked at that scholar, The cold aura from his body exploded, causing the people around him to subconsciously move away. In an instant, it became a vacuum zone. But that scholar did not notice it. Although he suddenly felt a chill, his eyes were still staring at Gong Yimo, unable to pull away. This made Gong Dai slightly narrowed his eyes and snorted. The entire street was filled with cheering people. Bai Sheng used a lot of effort to squeeze to Gong Dai's side. Sure enough, once he reached the prince's side, it was much better. There was a vacuum zone around him. Finally, he could take a breather. Your Highness. This subordinate found out that many people have been mobilized and their target is the princess. If this continues, it will be difficult to smoothly enter the palace. Your Highness, please give your orders. Do you see that person? Gong Dai lightly opened his mouth. Bai Sheng quickly looked over. There were many people and he did not know who Gong Dai was talking about. The blue-robed scholar. Ah, I see him. Bai Sheng rubbed his fists. That person is an assassin? What does your Highness want to do? Gong Dai pursed his lips and coldly said, he doesn't look young anymore. Go and check. If he is not married, find a strong woman for him. I think the daughter of the butcher of the city's west is not bad. The daughter of the butcher of the city's west was famous for being shrewish. Although she was not bad-looking, she had caused the death of 4 of her husbands. As a result, no one dared to marry her. At that time, Bai Sheng had treated this as a joke and told Gong Dai. Bai Sheng thought that he had heard wrongly. He widened his eyes and said, ah. Only then did Gong Dai turn his head and coldly stare at him. That gaze made Bai Sheng's hair stand on end. You don't understand. I understand. I completely understand. What the hell did he understand? The villain in Bai Sheng's heart was shedding tears. He was too shocked to remember what the prince said just now. It seemed that the prince wanted to act as a matchmaker for a stranger. Could it be that today's surprise was too big and the prince also wanted to do something good to celebrate? Then the assassins sent by those people. You lead the way and pass down my order. Anyone who blocks the way will have their entire family exterminated. Gong Dai sneered, in the past, I turned a blind eye and let them go because they were still useful. It doesn't mean that I don't have evidence to kill them. If you dare to help the tiger do evil and fish in troubled waters, you can try. Yes. Bai Sheng was in high spirits. The prince was so domineering. Also, tell Lo Chi to send 10,000 imperial guards to welcome them. Yes. 10,000 imperial guards. There was no need to tell the emperor. Bai Sheng was convinced from the bottom of his heart. With the prince around, there was no pressure for the princess to return to the palace. Once Gong Dai's words were heard, many people ceased their activities and bided their time. Many princes who wanted to make a move did not even have a minister to support them. They could only watch helplessly. There were also people who were bold enough to not fear Gong Dai. For example, Gong Shuo and the Empress Dowager. They were in a situation where they would not rest until Gong Yimo was dead. At this moment, Gong Shuo looked gloomily at the people crowding around the flower carriage to the palace. His hands were clenched tightly. It was as if he wanted to crush someone's bones. One Gong Dai was already making things difficult for them. If Gong Yimo really revived, would there be any place for him in Daiyu state? Thinking of this, the scar on his arm was aching. There was once when Gong Dai almost chopped off his arm. He must take revenge for this. Long Hanyang stood beside him with an ugly expression on her face. She and Gong Yimo were not on the same side, but they were working together now. She looked at Gong Yimo's proud face and felt resentment and jealousy. No wonder Gong Dai liked her. With her foxy appearance, she was used to seducing people. She must have taken advantage of Gong Dai when he was young to make a move on Gong Dai. How shameless. At this moment, someone gave Gong Yimo a small basket of honey-stained hawthorns. Gong Yimo was overjoyed. She placed a hawthorn in her mouth. It tasted sweet and sour, causing her to squint her eyes in happiness. Then she turned around, bent down, and reached out to deliver a hawthorn to Gong Ju's mouth. Gong Ju looked up and met her sparkling eyes. For a moment, he was addicted. It's really delicious. Don't you want to try it? Her hair hung down and her smile was more dazzling than the sun. Gong Dai's heart softened. He lowered his head and put the hawthorn in his mouth. Chapter 231. Traces of sweetness blossomed on the tip of his tongue. It was the taste that he hated the most, but when Gong Yimo fed it to his mouth, it made him retract his aura. He was like a tiger that had been pacified. The threat disappeared in an instant. Gong Yimo watched him eat the hawthorn and wanted to feed him another one. At this moment, she suddenly heard a noise from afar. The smile on her face disappeared and she looked indifferently in front of her. She knew that this journey would not be smooth, so she decided to keep a high profile. She did not expect that there would be people who dared to take the risk of being identified by the world to ambush her. These people were probably the legendary cannon fodder, right? The sudden appearance of a group of masked men caused the commoners to panic. Kill. They did not waste any time and wanted to rush into the crowd to kill. Their target was the commoners. If someone died, the commoners would naturally disperse and only Gong Yimo would be left. At this moment, many experts dressed as commoners suddenly appeared from the crowd. They rushed forward and fought with the masked men, protecting the commoners behind them. Gong Yimo wanted to join in the fight, but Gong Dai pulled her skirt. Although he was standing beside the horse carriage like a waiter, his noble aura made it impossible to distinguish him from a commoner. Even in a crowd, he was the most eye-catching one. Protecting his beloved in broad daylight, this feeling was really good. Don't worry, these are my men. They are enough to deal with those people. As expected, as soon as he finished speaking, the assassins sent by the other party were all slaughtered. Then, those people quickly dragged the corpses away. The entire process was silent, like puppets, fast and uniform. This was obviously Gong Dai's usual style of governance, but it was too fast. Was the other party too weak, or was Gong Dai's men too strong? Gong Yimo was convinced. Seeing that most of the commoners were still panicking, she was about to say something when Gong Dai slowly walked out and stood at the front. Next, you will follow me. His voice wasn't loud, but it clearly reached everyone's ears, making them strangely quiet down. Gong Dai glanced over the crowd at Gong Yimo. For the first time, he actually revealed a smile to the crowd. He originally had an exquisite and devilish appearance, but usually, no one dared to look directly at his face. Now, his smile was like the melting of ice and snow. It actually stunned many people, both men and women. That was why it was said that food and lust were part of human nature. In the face of beauty, it was as if nothing had happened. This calmed them down. I, Gong Dai, will escort you all to the palace gates. The journey will be dangerous, but I can handle it alone. If you don't trust me, you can retreat. If you trust me, you can go forward. He didn't say anything inspiring, he was just using himself as an example. He himself was the authority, the most terrifying person in the hearts of these commoners. Could it be that there was someone more terrifying than him? Many people looked at each other and saw the eagerness in each other's eyes. That was a prince, and he was going to escort them. For a moment, everyone was filled with lofty sentiment. We will escort the princess into the palace. Escort the princess into the palace. The crowd once again became lively. The fear from before had not dissipated, but under Gong Dai's intimidation, that fear turned into determination. The group once again moved forward. Although it wasn't as lively as before, everyone's expression was serious, as if they were completing a mission. The man at the front had a cold and calm temperament, which was the source of their courage. Protecting the commoners and inspiring them, this was originally what Gong Yimo wanted to do, but Gong Dai was one step ahead of her. Gong Yimo looked at Gong Dai's back and smiled faintly. The wind lifted his clothes. He didn't turn back, but that straight back, proud and indifferent, actually made her feel a sense of security. How many years had it been? This was the first time she felt that she was being protected. This feeling actually didn't make her resist it. Instead, she was somewhat happy. Gong Dai had really grown up. He had grown up to be able to protect her. But this road wasn't easy to walk. Not long after, someone blocked Gong Dai again. And this time, the number of people was obviously much more than the previous time. In broad daylight, one side wanted to kill people, and the other side wanted to escort people into the palace. But no one dared to intervene. From this, it could be seen that the higher-ups were in a complicated and turbulent situation regarding Gong Yimou's return. So, most people chose to be neutral and watch from the sidelines, waiting for the situation to develop. This time, there were assassins blocking the way. Although there were still people who were afraid, Gong Dai stood in front and didn't move. They were reassured and didn't move. There were even people who stared at the assassins in front, their eyes filled with disgust as if they were looking at a traitor. When the people on the other side saw Gong Dai at the front, they hesitated for a moment. Even if they hadn't experienced Gong Dai's methods, they had heard of it. Especially when they saw a narrow sword in his hand, they actually shrank back. At this time, suddenly, another group of people appeared from behind. There were quite a number of people. Gong Dai thought that they were also people who came to block the way. His eyes narrowed slightly. It was difficult for him to ensure the safety of ordinary people under a pincer attack. He didn't care, but the royal sister cared. But the second group of people were afraid of being accidentally injured and shouted from afar, "Your Highness, we are here to help on behalf of the Empress." The Empress? Gong Dai originally wanted to refuse. He didn't need anyone's help. But he glanced at Gong Yimou beside him. In order to avoid unnecessary casualties and make the royal sister unhappy, it was fine to intervene. So, he directly put away his narrow sword and said, "Many thanks." So, what was originally a confrontation between the assassins and Gong Dai suddenly became a confrontation between the assassins and the Empress's secret guards. Gong Dai was happy to be free. He led people from behind and continued forward. Seeing that the two groups of people didn't even touch the side of Gong Yimou, Gong Shi felt that he couldn't wait any longer. He wanted to catch Gong Yimou, but if he waited for those trash to create chaos, he wouldn't be able to count on them. He might as well do it himself. On the other side, Long Hanyang sneered, "It should have been like this long ago. Imperial grandmother's people aren't trash." She looked at the people below. They couldn't even beat the Empress's people. She was really disappointed. Not to mention touching a hair of Gong Yimou, even Gong Dai didn't make a move. Coming out was just a disgrace. Gong Dai also knew that the first few battles were just appetizers. The real battle was yet to come. Seeing that the imperial city was not far away, Gong Dai suddenly stopped. At this time, many people rushed out from all directions. They were all full of murderous aura. Obviously, they were all elites. Gong Dai smiled faintly. It was really a big move. When the commoners saw so many people coming out, they were a little scared. Especially when there were countless arrows on both sides of the street, and the cold arrows were aimed at them. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.